Hey everyone. Welcome back to Pika Fiction. Today we're diving into an amazing story called What If Ash Was Saved by Meloetta and She Used Her Song to Transform into His Human Bride. If you love story content like this, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 1, A Song for the End of the World. The world did not end with a bang, or a whimper. It ended with a scream. It was a sound that tore at the very concept of acoustics, a keening shriek that was both the guttural roar of a beast and the shattering of a trillion panes of glass. It was the sound of space breaking. Palkia, a deity of pearlescent light and impossible angles, reared back, and the sky above the spear pillar fractured. The cracks were not in the clouds, but in the firmament itself, showing glimpses of swirling, hostile nebulae where a placid blue should have been. A counterpoint answered, a low, grinding groan that vibrated in the teeth and bones. Dialga, cobalt and silver, moved its head a fraction of an inch, and time stuttered. Ash Ketchum saw the moment replay itself 3 times in a row, a starly, caught in the open, trying to flee. It beat its wings forward, then snapped back, then forward again, a feathered prisoner in a cage of seconds. Pikachu, get back! Ash yelled, the words feeling sluggish and thick in his throat. The air itself was a syrupy, temporal mess. Pika, his partner shrieked, landing beside Ash's worn sneakers, sparks flying from his red cheeks in pure, unadulterated fear. He wasn't looking at the gods tearing reality apart. He was looking at Ash's hand. Ash followed his gaze. His fingers were fuzzy. The edges of his skin seemed to blur, the solid lines of his knuckles losing their definition. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was as if the air itself, no, the idea of the air, was starting to find him less and less convincing. Another spatial wren from Palkia. This one was closer. A chasm of non-space opened up just 20 feet away. It wasn't a hole in the ground, it was a hole in the world. It didn't lead anywhere. It was a place defined only by its own absence. The edge of it was a sharp, black line that consumed the light. A chunk of ancient stone pillar slid into it and did not fall, it simply ceased to be. The pull was gentle at first, a faint, persuasive tug, like a current in still water. We have to move. Ash grunted, scooping a trembling Pikachu into his arms. He took a step back, planting his foot on solid ground, but the ground protested. The stone beneath his heel flickered, turning translucent for a horrifying instant before reaffirming its existence. He stumbled, catching his balance just as Dialga let out another groan. This time, the world lurched. Ash saw a vision of himself as a 10-year-old, waving goodbye to his mother in Pallet Town, the memory so vivid he could smell the morning dew. Then he was older, standing on a windswept peak, a girl with honey blonde hair smiling at him, a memory that hadn't happened yet. The temporal whiplash was nauseating. He squeezed his eyes shut, clutching Pikachu tighter. It's okay, buddy, he lied, his voice barely a whisper. We're okay. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. They weren't okay. Nothing was okay. The red chain, the artifact meant to control these titans, lay in shattered pieces, its power spent, its purpose failed. Cynthia was somewhere on the far side of the pillar, her Garchomp trying to hold the line against the raw physics of creation, a battle as futile as a child trying to stop a hurricane with a paper fan. The gentle tug from the void was no longer gentle. It was a hungry, insistent pull. Ash watched in horror as the sleeve of his jacket began to fray, not with wear, but with unbeing. Threads of blue and white fabric dissolved into nothingness, not even leaving motes of dust behind. The void was pulling at him, specifically. It had found him. A mortal, a speck of organized matter and fleeting consciousness, caught between the two fundamental forces that had birthed the universe. He was an anomaly. And the universe, in its violent, chaotic way, was correcting its error. He tried to dig his heels in, but the ground was no longer reliable. The pull intensified, yanking him off his feet. He landed hard on his back, sliding across the stone. Pikachu scrambled, his claws finding no purchase, his small body a yellow blur of panic. No! Ash gasped, his lungs feeling empty. The pull was on his legs now, his boots dematerializing. He felt a cold that had no temperature, a deep, cellular cold that spoke of utter cessation. He could feel his own atoms losing their argument with the void. This was it. Not a heroic blaze of glory. Not a noble sacrifice. Just, being erased. A typo deleted from the manuscript of existence. His last coherent thought was a flare of pure, defiant anger. He had fought too hard, traveled too far, cared too much, to just, end. Pikachu let out a desperate, heartbroken cry, a sound that cut through the temporal static and spatial tearing. It was a plea, a prayer, an accusation hurled at the cosmos. And the cosmos, for the first time, seemed to answer. It started not as a sound, but as a feeling. A single, perfect note of warmth in the encroaching, absolute zero. A pinprick of light in the devouring darkness. Then, the sound bloomed. It was a song. It wasn't just heard, it was felt. It was a melody that pushed back against the scream of Palkia, a harmony that soothed the groan of Dialga. It was a song of ancient lullabies and future anthems, a song that spoke of quiet groves and starlit skies. It resonated not in Ash's ears, but in his chest, in the very marrow of his bones that were threatening to turn to dust. A figure descended from the fractured sky, a being of impossible grace. She was small, ethereal, with a flowing form that seemed to be made of solidified music. Green hair like new spring leaves, eyes that held the depth of an endless night sky, and a gem on her forehead that pulsed with a gentle, turquoise light. Meloetta. She wasn't looking at the rampaging gods. Her entire being was focused on him, on the boy who was coming undone at the seams. The void was pulling him faster now, his legs gone up to the knees, the nothingness creeping up his torso. He could feel his memories starting to flake away. The names of his Pokémon, the faces of his friends, they were becoming distant, like faded photographs. Meloetta's song deepened, shifting in tone. It was no longer just a soothing melody. A new power entered it, a sense of urgency, of sacrifice. A form of the relic song he had heard once before, but this was different. Then, it had been a transformation, a change of form for herself. Now it was a tool of creation. A desperate, impossible act of preservation. She drifted closer, her small hands outstretched. The air around her shimmered, not with breaking reality, but with the raw, untapped power of life itself. The turquoise gem on her forehead flared, and a ribbon of pure, liquid light, the color of her hair, flowed from it. It wasn't an attack. It was an offering. The ribbon of light didn't strike him, it wove into him. Where the void had been consuming, the light began to knit. He felt it plunge into the emptiness where his legs had been, not replacing the flesh, but providing an anchor, a fundamental argument for his existence that the void could not counter. It was a torrent of life force, of divine energy, poured into a mortal vessel that was actively being shattered. He cried out, a sound that was half pain, half exaltation. It felt like being forged. The cold of the void warred with the fire of her song. He could feel her essence, her very being, intertwining with his own. It wasn't a transfusion, it was a fusion. Her song was becoming his bedrock. Her life force was becoming his structure. To save him from being erased, she was writing herself into his very code. The song reached its crescendo. Meloetta's form flickered, a terrible, sacrificial dimming. She was pouring everything into this one, final act. The light from her gem, the ribbon of her essence, pulsed violently. A wave of energy, silent but absolute, erupted from the point of their connection. It was not a destructive blast. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated harmony. It washed over the spear pillar. The spatial cracks did not just close, they healed, stitched together by notes of music. The temporal stutters did not just cease, time flowed smoothly, settling into its proper rhythm like a river finding its banks after a flood. The wave of harmony washed over Dialga and Palkia. The two titans flinched, not from pain, but from clarity. The mindless, primal rage in their eyes cleared, replaced by a dawning, cosmic confusion, as if they were awakening from a terrible nightmare. With a final, subdued cry, Palkia opened a stable portal to its own dimension and vanished. Dialga followed a moment later, the spear pillar falling into a sudden, profound silence. Ash felt none of this. His entire universe had collapsed to a single point, the connection. The fire in his veins. The song that was now his very heartbeat. He saw Meloetta's face, her eyes wide, a silent message passing between them that was deeper than any words. It was a promise. It was a farewell. It was a new beginning. Her form, now almost completely translucent, gave one final, radiant pulse. The world dissolved into white light, the last sound he heard the fading echo of her song. Then, nothing. He awoke to the sound of a single, insistent bird. It wasn't the chaotic chirping of a city park. It was a clear, melodic call, repeated with the unwavering confidence of a creature that owned the sky. Ash's eyes fluttered open. He wasn't at the spear pillar. The hard, ancient stone was gone, replaced by a bed of soft, emerald moss. Dappled sunlight filtered through a thick canopy of leaves, painting shifting patterns on his face. The air was clean, cool, and smelled of damp earth and blooming flowers. He sat up, a groan escaping his lips. His body ached. Not the sharp pain of injury, but the deep, resonant ache of having been pushed past every conceivable limit and then some. He looked down at himself. His clothes were shredded, his jacket barely clinging to his shoulders, but his skin was whole. His legs were there. He wiggled his toes, watching the simple, miraculous movement. They were his. Something was different, though. Terribly, wonderfully different. The world was too loud. Not in volume, but in clarity. He could hear the rustle of a wurmple chewing on a leaf 20 yards away. He could hear the gentle gurgle of a nearby stream, not as a single sound, but as a complex orchestra of water flowing over individual stones. The world was too bright. The green of the moss wasn't just green, it was 100 different shades, from deep forest to pale lime, each one distinct and vibrant. He looked at his hand, the one that had been dissolving into nothingness. The lines of his palm seemed carved with impossible detail. He felt sharp. Focused. Like a photograph that had been blurry his whole life had suddenly snapped into perfect, high-definition focus. And beneath it all, there was a hum. A low, resonant frequency that seemed to be coming from inside him, a vibration in his bones that felt as natural and as constant as his own pulse. Pika-Pi. Ash turned. Pikachu was sitting a few feet away, looking at him with wide, concerned eyes. His yellow fur was matted, his ears were drooping, but he was okay. A wave of relief so powerful it almost knocked Ash over washed through him. "Hey, buddy," Ash said, his voice raspy. He reached out, and Pikachu scurried into his lap, nuzzling his head against his chest. The familiar weight was the most reassuring thing he had ever felt. "Chew," Pikachu murmured, then looked up, not at Ash, but past him. His nose twitched. His ears perked. Ash followed his gaze. She was sitting on a fallen, moss-covered log across the small clearing. She looked to be his age, perhaps a year or two younger. Her form was slender, and she was dressed in a simple, seamless garment that seemed to be woven from the same light that had filled the world before he blacked out. It shifted from a pale green to a soft turquoise as she moved. Her hair, a vibrant, impossible shade of emerald green, was cut in a sharp, stylish bob that framed a face of delicate, otherworldly beauty. But it was her eyes that held him. They were a deep, dark blue, almost black, but within them danced flecks of light, like musical notes scattered across a sheet of midnight. She was watching him with an expression of intense curiosity, mixed with a profound, soul-deep weariness. Ash's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know her. He had never seen her before in his life. And yet, he knew her better than he knew himself. It was a paradox that made his head spin. He felt a pull toward her, a sense of familiarity that went beyond memory, beyond logic. It was as if a part of his own soul was sitting across the clearing, looking back at him. Pikachu, feeling the tension in Ash's chest, let out a low growl. The girl's gaze shifted to Pikachu. A small, tentative smile touched her lips. It was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It is all right," she said. Her voice was a shock. It was quiet, melodic, and yet it carried the same impossible resonance as the song that had saved him. It was like hearing a symphony played on a single violin. He does not recognize this form. Ash stared, his mind struggling to connect the dots. Form. Recognize? Who are you? He asked, the question feeling foolish and small. She tilted her head, the movement fluid and graceful. The musical notes in her eyes seemed to dance. "You know who I am," she replied, not as a challenge, but as a simple statement of fact. "You feel it. The song is still there. It is, us." The hum in his bones intensified, vibrating in time with her words. The song. The memory crashed back into him. The chaos, the void, the light. Meloetta. He looked at her again, truly looked. The green hair. The eyes. The impossible grace. The song in his blood. Meloetta, he whispered, the name feeling both sacred and unbelievable. Her smile widened, and this time, it was genuine. It was a smile of relief, of vindication. "Not in name," she said, her voice gaining a touch of strength. "Not anymore. That was a title. A form. This," she gestured to herself, to her hands, her legs, her solid presence, "this is what remains." Ash pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaky. Pikachu clung to his shirt, still wary. He took a hesitant step toward her, then another. The closer he got, the stronger the pull, the louder the hum. It was like two tuning forks, struck to the same pitch, being brought together. "I don't understand," he said, his mind reeling. "You saved me. You were, and now you're," he trailed off, unable to finish. "Human." The word seemed inadequate. "The void was unmaking you," she explained, her voice patient, like a teacher explaining a complex but fundamental truth. "It was removing you from the pattern of existence. To anchor you, I had to give you a new pattern. I had to weave myself into you." She stood up and took a step toward him, mirroring his advance. "But my form, my previous existence, was one of divine energy and sound. It could not exist in such close, permanent proximity to a mortal form. It would have consumed you. A star cannot live inside a candle flame. The song that binds us required a new harmony." They were only a few feet apart now. He could see the exhaustion etched around her eyes. He could also see the raw, terrifying, beautiful power simmering just beneath her skin. "So you, changed?" Ash asked, the word tasting insufficient. "I became what was necessary," she corrected gently. "This form. A human form. It is stable. It can coexist with you. It allows the bond to hold without destroying either of us. We are, two bodies, now. But we are one life. One life." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. He felt the truth of them in the core of his being. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and stopped just short of touching her arm. "What does that mean?" "One life." She met his gaze, her musical eyes holding his. There was no fear in them, only an unwavering certainty. "It means that if your heart stops beating, so does mine. It means if I am wounded, you will feel my pain." The song that saved you, now it is the song that defines us. We cannot be parted. We cannot be undone. Not without unraveling us both. The sheer, terrifying weight of her words settled on him. He wasn't just Ash Ketchum anymore. He wasn't just a Pokemon trainer from Pallet Town. He was one half of a whole, inextricably linked to a former deity who had sacrificed her very nature to keep him from ceasing to exist. He looked at her, at this impossible girl with the song in her voice and the universe in her eyes. She was a stranger, and she was the most familiar person he had ever known. A flicker of his old self, the impulsive, straightforward Ash, surfaced. This was too big, too cosmic. He needed to ground it. He needed to make it real. "Do you have a name?" he asked. She blinked, the question seemingly catching her off guard. "I was Meloetta." "You were Meloetta," he said, his voice firm, decisive. The new clarity in his mind seized on the distinction. "You said it yourself. That was a title. A form. What are you now?" He looked at her, at the melodic grace of her posture, the harmonic resonance of her presence. A name surfaced in his mind, simple, fitting, and right. "How about Melody?" She tested the word on her tongue, mouthing it silently. A slow, wondrous smile spread across her face. It was the first truly unguarded expression he had seen from her. It was like watching the sun rise. "Melody," she repeated aloud. The word sounded like a chord, perfectly played. "I like that. Yes. I am Melody." A sense of rightness, of a piece clicking into place, settled over him. Ash and Melody. It felt correct. The ache in his body was still there, the world was still too sharp and loud, and the implications of their bond were a terrifying mountain range he would have to learn to climb. But for the first time since waking up, a measure of peace settled in his heart. He finally closed the distance, his hand gently touching her arm. The moment his skin met hers, a jolt, warm and electric, shot through them both. It wasn't static. It was recognition. The hum in his bones sang. He felt a wave of her emotions wash over him, weariness, uncertainty, but underneath it all, a deep and abiding sense of relief. She was feeling his own emotions in return, he could sense it. His resolve, his acceptance, his quiet, dawning awe. Pikachu, still in Ash's arms, finally seemed to understand. He looked from Ash to Melody, his black eyes wide. He sniffed her arm, then let out a soft, inquisitive "cha." He recognized the essence, the core of the being who had once sung with him in the abyssal ruins. He relaxed, resting his head back on Ash's shoulder, a silent, furry seal of approval. "Okay," Ash said, his voice full of a confidence he didn't entirely feel, but knew he needed to project. "For both their sakes." "Okay, Melody. So, what now?" Melody looked around the tranquil grove, then back at him, her hand instinctively covering his on her arm. "Now," she said, her voice soft but clear, "we learn how to be." It was a simple, profound mission statement for a life that had just become infinitely complex. The great adventure of becoming a Pokemon master was over, erased in a moment of cosmic violence. A new one of discovery, survival, and harmony, was just beginning. In a place that was not a place, a world of inverted colors and impossible physics, a shadow stirred. It was a dimension of perpetual twilight, where the rules of up and down were a matter of opinion and the very ground could betray you. The distortion world. Its master, a being of immense, ancient power, felt a tremor. It was not a physical tremor, but a discordant note in the grand symphony of reality. For eons, it had policed the boundaries, a silent, renegade guardian ensuring the fundamental laws were not broken. Mortals remained mortals. Pokemon remained Pokemon. And the divine, the legendary, remained separate, their power too great for the fragile architecture of the lower world. It was the natural order. It was the only thing preventing existence from collapsing into the same chaos from which it was born. But something had just happened. A tear in the fabric had been mended, not by the slow, careful work of the titans of time and space, but by a song. A mortal had been infused with the divine. A deity had willingly shed its nature to become lesser. Tainted. The union was an abomination. A dissonant, impure chord struck in the heart of creation. In the deepest, darkest corner of the twisting, broken dimension, a colossal, serpentine form shifted. 6 powerful legs scraped against crystallized shadow. 2 great, ethereal wings, ribbed with crimson spikes, unfurled silently. A pair of golden, slitted eyes opened, burning with cold, analytical fury. Giratina, the renegade, had felt the creation of the anomaly. And in its silent, ordered mind, a single, unwavering purpose formed. The impurity would be corrected. The dissonance must be silenced. Chapter 2, The weight of a crown. The silence that followed their new beginning was heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. In the tranquil glade, the world kept turning, oblivious. A pidgey landed on a branch overhead, chirping its territorial claim. A stream whispered secrets to the stones it polished. For Ash Ketchum, these simple, timeless sounds were a deafening roar. He stood with his hand on Melody's arm, the warmth of her skin a grounding reality. The hum that resonated between them was a constant, a low thrum that had already become as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. It was the background music to this new, terrifyingly vivid world. He could feel the pidgey's tiny, frantic heart. He could feel the slow, patient life in the moss under his feet. He could feel Melody's exhaustion, a deep, oceanic weariness that threatened to pull her under. "You need to rest," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The words weren't a suggestion, they were a command born of instinct. He could feel her energy reserves, not just see her fatigue. They were dangerously low. Melody looked at him, her musical note eyes wide with a trace of surprise at his authoritative tone. She gave a slow, reluctant nod. "The creation of this form, it took more than I anticipated." "You saved my life," Ash stated simply. There was no room for debate in his voice. "You poured your entire being into me. Now, it's my turn to take care of you." It was a simple declaration, the kind he had made 1,000 times for his Pokémon. But this was different. This wasn't about winning a battle or finding the next Pokémon Center. This was a fundamental responsibility, a debt he could never repay but would spend his life honoring. It was the first weight of the invisible crown she had placed upon his head. He gently guided her to the mossy bank where he had awoken, his movements careful and deliberate. Pikachu, sensing the shift in dynamics, hopped from his shoulder and stood guard, a tiny, electrified sentinel. Melody sank down, her posture elegant even in her exhaustion. She watched him with an unblinking, analytical curiosity as he moved. He needed to think. Not the way he used to think, a straight line of gut instinct from problem to punch. This was different. His mind felt, expanded. He was processing information on multiple levels. Problem, Melody is weak. Solution, food, water, safety. But beneath that, other streams of data flowed. The forest was a living network. He could feel the flow of water in the earth, the areas where sunlight penetrated the canopy and ripened the berries. "I'll be right back," he said, turning towards the densest part of the woods. "Don't go too far," Melody's voice called after him, a thread of anxiety coloring her melodic tone. He felt the anxiety as a sharp pang in his own chest, a dissonant chord in their shared song. He paused and looked back at her, forcing a confident smile. "I won't. I can't." He didn't need to explain the truth of that statement. The bond between them was a tangible tether. He could feel her presence, her location, as surely as he could feel the ground beneath his feet. Getting lost was no longer possible. He moved through the undergrowth with an unfamiliar grace. His body, once prone to clumsy stumbles and enthusiastic but uncoordinated dashes, now responded with quiet efficiency. He sidestepped roots he hadn't consciously seen, ducked under branches without breaking stride. It was as if his body knew the path his mind was just now perceiving. The forest wasn't an obstacle, it was a system, and he was learning to read its language. He followed the sound and feel of the stream to its source, a small, clear spring bubbling up from a cluster of rocks. He cupped his hands, the water shockingly cold and pure. He drank, and the simple act was a revelation. It wasn't just wet, it had a taste of minerals, of earth, of ancient stone. He drank until the deep ache in his muscles began to subside. His new senses led him to a patch of oran berries. They weren't just blue, they were a complex tapestry of color, and he could sense the life-giving energy within them, a gentle, restorative glow that was invisible to the naked eye. He gathered a dozen, his hands moving with practiced certainty, before his internal compass pulled him back towards the clearing. When he returned, Melody was where he had left her, but her eyes were closed. Pikachu was dozing at her side, one ear twitching at the slightest sound. For a moment, a spike of fear lanced through Ash. He felt for her presence through their bond and was relieved to find it, a soft, warm ember banked low but still burning. He knelt in front of her. Melody. Her eyes fluttered open. The weariness was still there, but so was a flicker of something else. Gratitude. I brought you these, he said, offering the oran berries in his cupped hands. She looked at the berries, then at him. She took one, her fingers brushing his, and the light contact sent another jolt of harmonic resonance through him. She held the berry to her nose, inhaling its scent. Then, she took a small, hesitant bite. Her eyes went wide. It was like watching a blind person see color for the first time. A cascade of emotions washed over him through their bond, shock, wonder, overwhelming, pure, unadulterated joy. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "It's an oran berry," Ash said, confused. "They're good for you. They restore energy." "No," she said, looking at the half-eaten fruit as if it were a priceless gem. "This sensation. In my previous form, I understood nourishment. I understood the concept of sweetness. But this is different. It has texture. A flavor that changes. It is an experience." She took another bite, slower this time, savoring it. Ash watched, mesmerized. He was witnessing the birth of a person. Meloetta, the divine being, knew everything. Melody, the human girl, knew nothing. She was a library of cosmic knowledge trapped in a body that was just learning how to read. She finished the berry, then another, and another. With each one, he could feel the faint ember of her life force grow a little brighter, the hum in his own bones a little stronger. She offered the last berry to Pikachu, who sniffed it, took it gently in his paws, and devoured it in 2 quick bites before giving a contented cha. The simple act of sharing seemed to cement something between them. "Thank you, Ash," Melody said, her voice stronger now. She looked at him, and the gratitude in her eyes was so profound it made him look away, a faint blush creeping up his neck. "Don't mention it," he mumbled, suddenly feeling shy. He was good at grand gestures, at facing down legends. He was not good at this quiet, intense intimacy. He stood and walked to the edge of the stream, needing a moment to process. He was Ash Ketchum. His life had a script: travel, meet new Pokémon, make new friends, challenge the gym leader, win the badge, move on. It was a simple, satisfying loop. That script had just been burned. What was he supposed to do now? He couldn't just walk into the next town and challenge the gym. Not when he was part of a secret, divine fusion. Not when the girl he was fused with was experiencing the taste of a berry for the first time. The weight of it settled on him again. It wasn't just a responsibility, it was a cage. His old life, his ambitions, were they gone? He thought of Brock, Misty, Serena, Clement, Bonnie, all his friends. Could he ever see them again? How could he explain this? "Hey guys, sorry I've been out of touch. I almost got erased from existence, but a mythical Pokemon sacrificed her divinity to save me, turned into a human girl, and now we share a life force. So, how's your week been? A wave of frustration and helplessness washed over him. Melody must have felt it, because her voice came from behind him, soft and concerned. Ash? He didn't turn around. This is a lot, he admitted, staring at his reflection in the water. The face looking back was his, but the eyes were different. Older. More focused. My whole life, I've had one goal. To be a Pokemon master. To be the very best. I don't know what I am now. You are Ash, she said simply. But what does that even mean anymore? He shot back, a flicker of his old fire showing through. I'm not just me. I'm us. I can hear the whole forest. I can feel you feeling tired. I knew where to find those berries without even looking. This isn't normal. He felt her move closer. The resonance between them intensified, a soothing hum that pushed back against his frustration. What is normal? She asked, her tone genuinely curious. Was it normal to stand against titans who control time and space? Was it normal to befriend creatures of lightning and fire? Your life was never normal, Ash. It was exceptional. This is just the next chapter. Her logic was infuriatingly sound. He sighed, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a weary acceptance. She was right. His definition of normal had been stretched to the breaking point long before this. He finally turned to face her. So what's in this next chapter? We can't stay here forever. No, she agreed. We cannot. Her gaze drifted upwards, towards the sky, but her focus seemed to be on something much farther away. The song that created us, it was not silent. It was a chord that rang through the entire world. Some will have heard it and thought it was just thunder. But others, who are attuned to the deeper music of the world, they will have heard it for what it was. An event. An anomaly. And they'll come looking, Ash finished, the pieces clicking into place. They will come looking, she confirmed. Some with curiosity. Some with fear. And some, with malice. A cold shiver ran down Ash's spine, a feeling that had nothing to do with their bond. It was the primal instinct of being hunted. He remembered the feeling of the void, of being an error that needed correcting. Maybe they still were. Then we need to move, he said, his voice once again firm, decisive. The moment of doubt had passed. The path wasn't clear, but the first step was. Survive. We need to find somewhere safe. Somewhere we can figure this out. Where would such a place be? Melody asked, her trust in his judgment absolute. That was the question. He ran through a mental list of places he knew. Professor Oak's lab. Too public. His mom's house in Pallet Town. He wouldn't put her in that kind of danger. He needed someone who understood the things that lived in the cracks of the world, someone who dealt with myths and legends as a matter of course. Someone powerful enough to be a shield. The answer came to him in a flash of blonde hair and black attire. Cynthia, he said, the name tasting like a solution. The champion of Sinnoh. She was there. At the spear pillar. If anyone can help us, or at least understand, before he could finish the thought, a shadow fell over the clearing. It was sudden and absolute. Both Ash and Melody looked up. It wasn't a cloud. A colossal, winged shape had blotted out the sun, hovering 100 feet above the canopy. It was too sleek to be a Fiero, too large to be a Staraptor. Pikachu leaped to his feet, cheeks crackling with electricity. Pikachu. The creature descended, its powerful wings creating a downdraft that whipped leaves and twigs into a frenzy. It landed with a ground-shaking thud at the far end of the glade, its yellow, sickle-like claws digging into the soft earth. It was a Garchomp, and on its back, dismounting with the casual grace of someone stepping out of a car, was a tall woman in a black coat, her long blonde hair obscuring one eye. Cynthia. She didn't look at them at first. Her gaze swept the clearing, her sharp, gray eyes taking in everything. She noted the shattered remnants of the red chain energy that still clung to the air like ozone. She noted the strange, harmonic resonance that made the hairs on her arms stand up. She had not tracked them with technology or scouts. She had followed the feeling, the echo of the impossible song that had saved the world. It had led her here, to this quiet glade and the epicenter of the anomaly. Her gaze finally landed on them. She saw Ash, looking more intense and focused than she had ever seen him. She saw Pikachu, bristling with protective energy. And she saw the girl. The girl with the impossible green hair and the eyes that seemed to hold starlight. The girl who radiated an energy that felt both mythically powerful and terrifyingly fragile. Ash Ketchum, Cynthia said, her voice calm and measured, but carrying an authority that brooked no argument. I had a feeling I would find you here. Cynthia, Ash replied, his stance shifting from relaxed to wary. He moved slightly, placing himself between her and Melody. It was a subconscious, protective gesture. Cynthia's sharp eyes didn't miss it. The event at the spear pillar, the song that silenced gods, that was you, she said, looking at Melody. It wasn't a question. Meloetta. Melody inclined her head. That was a name I once held. Cynthia's gaze flickered between Melody and Ash, a dawning understanding in her eyes. She could feel the connection between them, a strange, powerful sympathy that was unlike any bond between a trainer and a Pokémon she had ever encountered. And what name do you hold now? She's Melody, Ash cut in, his tone sharp. He was taking the lead, establishing the terms. This wasn't an interrogation. And she's with me. I see, Cynthia said, her expression unreadable. She took a step forward. Her Garchomp let out a low rumble, a clear warning. Tell your Garchomp to stand down, Ash said, his voice dropping, losing its boyish tenor and gaining a hard, steel edge. We're not a threat to you. Cynthia raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this new, commanding version of the boy she knew. The entire region, possibly the world, just felt a reality-altering event on the level of a divine intervention. It originated from this spot. You are standing at its epicenter with a being that was, until yesterday, a myth. Forgive me if I reserve judgment on what is and isn't a threat until I have more information. She folded her arms. I need to know what you are. And I need to know what you can do. Ash's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. This was how people like Cynthia, people who lived and breathed battle, took the measure of things. You want to battle, he said. It wasn't a question. I want to understand, she corrected. A one-on-one exhibition. Your Pikachu against my Garchomp. No holds barred. Let me see the nature of this new power. Melody laid a hand on Ash's arm. He felt her fear, her plea to refuse. It was a sensible, logical fear. Garchomp was a champion's ace, a monster of a Pokémon. Pikachu was exhausted. They were in no condition to fight. But Ash felt something else. This wasn't a challenge to be won or lost. It was a test, yes, but it was also an opportunity. Cynthia wasn't an enemy. She was a potential, powerful ally. To win her trust, he had to show her what they were. Not by explaining, but by demonstrating. The decisiveness that was now a part of him took over. Fine, he said, his voice ringing with a sudden, unshakable confidence. He looked down at Pikachu. What do you say, buddy? You up for one more? Pikachu looked from Ash to Cynthia's Garchomp, a creature that towered over him like a skyscraper. He saw the challenge. He saw the weariness in his partner. And he saw the new, unwavering steel in Ash's eyes. He trusted that. He always had. He leaped from Ash's shoulder to the ground, landing with a soft thud. Sparks flew from his cheeks, brighter and more intense than before. "Pika," he chirped, a declaration of readiness. Cynthia gave a slight, impressed smile. "Very well." She backed away, giving them space. "Garchomp, take your position." The land shark Pokémon moved to the center of the glade, its massive form radiating power. It fixed its predatory gaze on the small, yellow mouse across from it. It was a comical mismatch in size, but Garchomp was too well trained to underestimate any opponent. Ash knelt down, putting him at eye level with Pikachu. "Listen to me, buddy. Not just with your ears. Feel it. We're going to do this together." He placed a hand on Pikachu's head. The hum, the resonance he shared with Melody, now flowed through him, into his oldest friend. Pikachu's ears twitched. His eyes widened slightly. He could feel it. The connection. The expanded awareness. Ash stood up and took his position, Melody a silent, worried presence just behind him. The air grew still. The birds went silent. "Begin," Cynthia said. What happened next was not a Pokémon battle. It was an execution. "Garchomp, Dragon Rush," Cynthia commanded. The pseudo-legendary roared, its body becoming enveloped in a shimmering, draconic aura. It charged, a blue and red missile of pure destruction, tearing up the ground as it came. The old Ash would have yelled, "Pikachu, dodge it." The new Ash saw the attack before it began. He saw the tensing of Garchomp's muscles, the flow of energy, the precise trajectory. He also saw the slight dip in the ground to Garchomp's left, the loose patch of soil. 2 steps left. "Now," Ash said, his voice calm, almost conversational. Pikachu moved. He wasn't just dodging. He was flowing. He took 2 precise, explosive steps, not a millimeter more than needed. The Dragon Rush tore past where he had been a microsecond before, Garchomp's momentum carrying it forward. "Volt Tackle," Ash commanded. Pikachu became a bolt of living lightning, cloaked in golden energy, and shot towards Garchomp's exposed flank. "Block it." "Brick Break," Cynthia countered, her voice sharp. Garchomp, impossibly fast for its size, twisted, its fin-like arm glowing with white energy. It was a perfect counter. But Ash wasn't watching the Brick Break. He was watching Garchomp's feet. "Break off. Aim for the ground at its left foot," Ash said. Pikachu, in mid-volt tackle, did something that should have been impossible. He changed his trajectory, peeling off the main attack and diving, his electrified body slamming not into Garchomp, but into the dirt just beside its ankle. The ground exploded. The volt tackle, combined with the loose soil Ash had spotted earlier, created a miniature landslide, destabilizing Garchomp's footing at the exact moment it was pivoting for the Brick Break. The behemoth stumbled. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible loss of balance, but it was enough. The Brick Break, which would have intercepted Pikachu perfectly, swung a fraction too wide. "Now, Iron Tail," Ash's voice cut through the air. Pikachu, using the explosion of dirt as a smokescreen and a springboard, was already in the air. His tail glowed with a metallic, silvery sheen. He spun, a yellow and silver discus of pain, and brought the iron tail down with surgical precision on the back of Garchomp's exposed knee joint. Crack. It wasn't the sound of bone breaking. It was the sound of a perfectly executed strike against a critical point. Garchomp roared, a sound of surprise and pain, as its leg buckled. Cynthia stared, her mouth slightly agape. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds. It wasn't a flurry of attacks. It was a single, elegant, brutal combination. Every move had a purpose. Every action flowed into the next. Ash wasn't just reacting to her commands, he was 3 steps ahead, turning her own Pokémon's power and momentum against it. He hadn't commanded a battle. He had choreographed a takedown. Behind him, Melody stood with her eyes closed, one hand pressed to her chest. She was humming, a low, subconscious thrum that was in perfect harmony with the resonance between her and Ash. She wasn't consciously helping, but her presence was a focusing lens, sharpening Ash's preternatural intuition into a razor-edged tactical blade. Garchomp, get up. Use Stone Edge. Cynthia urged, her voice tight with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Garchomp roared in defiance, forcing itself back to a stable stance. The ground around it glowed, and pillars of sharp rock began to erupt, shooting towards Pikachu. Electro Ball, high arc, Ash said, his eyes tracking the pattern of the erupting stones. Don't aim for Garchomp. Aim for the space above its head. Pikachu leaped onto one of the rising stone pillars, ran up its face, and launched a glittering orb of electricity into the sky. It flew in a high parabola, seemingly aimed at nothing. Now, quick attack. Weave through the pillars. Straight line, Ash commanded. Pikachu became a yellow blur, zigzagging between the deadly stone projectiles with an impossible agility, closing the distance to the still recovering Garchomp. Cynthia saw the trap a second too late. Garchomp, look out, the Electro Ball, having reached the apex of its arc, came screaming down. Because it had been launched from a greater height and with Garchomp's own stone edge providing cover, it had gained terrifying speed. It was a golden meteor falling directly on Garchomp's position. At the same time, Pikachu burst from the last of the stone pillars, rocketing towards Garchomp's chest. Garchomp was caught in a classic pincer, a dilemma of threats. Block the quick attack from the front, and the Electro Ball hits its unprotected head and back. Try to dodge or block the Electro Ball, and Pikachu slams into it. There was no right answer. Enough, Cynthia said, her voice sharp and clear. At her word, the Electro Ball dissipated a foot above Garchomp's head. Pikachu, hearing her command, aborted his quick attack, landing softly on the ground a few feet in front of the massive dragon, his cheeks still sparking. The battle was over. Ash hadn't won by knockout. He had won by checkmate. He had created a situation where victory was the only logical outcome, and Cynthia, recognizing it, had conceded. Silence returned to the glade. Garchomp let out a low, frustrated growl, more out of respect than anger. Cynthia recalled it to its pokeball, the red beam of light seeming inadequate for such a powerful creature. She walked towards Ash, her expression no longer unreadable. It was one of pure, unadulterated awe. In all my years as a trainer, in all my time as champion, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I have never seen anything like that. That wasn't a battle. That was art. She looked from Ash's hard, focused eyes to Melody's gentle, exhausted form. She looked at the bond that shimmered in the air between them. I asked what you were, Cynthia continued, her voice regaining its strength. I think I have my answer. You're not just a boy and a girl. You're not a trainer and a former legend. You are a sovereign entity. A new type of power in the world. Ash felt the tension leave his shoulders. He knelt and scooped up Pikachu, who was now trembling with exhaustion, the adrenaline faded. Thanks, buddy, he whispered. You were incredible. So, will you help us? Melody asked, her voice hopeful. Cynthia's face turned grim. The awe was replaced by a heavy seriousness. Help you? Yes. I have to. Because what you are, others will not see it as art. They will see it as a weapon to be controlled, or a disease to be cured. She reached into her coat and pulled out a sleek, black Rotom phone. Its screen was flashing with an urgent, encrypted message. That song you sang, it set off every alarm, real and metaphysical, on the planet. There are organizations, clandestine ones, whose entire purpose is to monitor and neutralize events like you. She keyed in a decryption sequence, her fingers flying across the screen. An image appeared, a dossier. Ash's stomach clenched. He saw a stylized logo, a shield with a sword behind it. The Aegis Division. They're an international task force, Cynthia explained, her voice low and urgent. They answer to no single government. Their mission is to eliminate what they call anomalous existential threats. AETs. And right now, you two are AET number 1. She scrolled down the file. A photograph appeared. A familiar face, with sharp, intense eyes and a perpetual scowl. Purple hair. A cold, calculating demeanor. They've already dispatched their top field agent to the Sinnoh region to investigate the energy source, Cynthia said, her gray eyes locking with Ash's. He's known for his ruthless efficiency and his single-minded pursuit of power and order. They say he's never failed a mission. She turned the phone around so Ash could see the picture clearly. His name is Paul. The name landed like a physical blow. Paul. His rival. The one who embodied everything Ash fought against, power without empathy, strength without kindness. And he was coming for them. Not for a battle. For a neutralization. The invisible crown on Ash's head suddenly felt 1,000 times heavier. The world was no longer just a place to explore. It was a battlefield. And the first soldier of the opposing army had a familiar, hated face. Chapter 3, The Ghost of Sparta. The world, which had just expanded into an impossibly detailed tapestry, abruptly snapped into a single, sharp point of focus, a face on a screen. A face Ash knew as well as his own, framed by severe purple hair and an expression of perpetual, dismissive disapproval. Paul. The name was a thunderclap in the quiet glade. It was the ghost of a past Ash thought he had outgrown, a reminder of a colder, crueler way of seeing the world. The ghost of Sparta, as some had called him, for his city of origin and his brutal, take-no-prisoners training philosophy. And he was coming. Not for a 6-on-6 battle to settle a rivalry, but for a neutralization. We need to go. Now, Cynthia said, her voice a commander's snap. The awe of moments ago was gone, replaced by grim, pragmatic urgency. She was already moving, her long black coat swirling around her as she headed for a thicker part of the woods. My car is hidden a half-mile from here. It's shielded, but even that won't buy you much time. Paul's teams are fast, and they are thorough. They will be sweeping the area with sensors that can detect everything from body heat to abnormal energy signatures. And we're an abnormal energy signature 100 feet tall, Ash muttered, hoisting the now deeply asleep Pikachu into a more secure position in his arms. The little mouse was completely drained, a dead weight of yellow fur. Melody was at his side instantly, her face pale. She had felt the spike of pure, cold dread from him when he saw Paul's face. It was different from the fear of the void or the awe of the gods. This was personal. This was human. Who is he? She asked, her voice a whisper. A rival, Ash said, the word inadequate. Someone who believes strength is the only thing that matters. And that anything he decides is weak, or wrong, needs to be eliminated. He looked at her, his eyes hard. He will see you as something to be dissected, and me as a contamination. The walk to Cynthia's car was a tense, silent march. Cynthia led the way, navigating the forest with the confidence of a predator. Ash followed, his senses on a knife's edge. The world was no longer a symphony, it was a cacophony of potential threats. The rustle of a leaf could be an approaching agent. The snap of a twig could be the prelude to an ambush. He could feel the life all around them, but now he was also searching for the cold, empty signature of technology, the scent of antiseptic and steel that he instinctively associated with forces like the Aegis Division. Cynthia's car was a sleek, black absurdity parked in a cleverly camouflaged alcove. It looked less like a vehicle and more like a folded-up stealth fighter. The doors hissed open without a sound. Get in, Cynthia ordered. I'm taking you to Eterna City. It's our best-worst option. Trying to hide in the wilderness is a fool's game, they can track you for miles. In a city, you are one signal among thousands. You'll have a chance to get lost in the noise. What about you? Ash asked as he carefully settled into the plush back seat, Melody sliding in beside him. I'm going to run interference, Cynthia said, her hands moving over a series of touchscreens on the dashboard. A holographic map of the Sinnoh region sprung to life between the front seats. I'm the champion. I have a certain amount of authority. I'll report a flare-up of distortion energy near the spear pillar and officially request that the area be quarantined. I'll tie them up in red tape and misdirection for as long as I can. It might buy you a day. Maybe two. The car pulled out onto a hidden access road, its tires barely whispering over the asphalt as it accelerated to an incredible speed. The forest blurred into a green smear. Eterna City has a historical museum, Cynthia continued, her eyes on the road but her attention clearly elsewhere. It's large, centrally located, and after hours, it's mostly empty. There's an emergency access tunnel in the basement that connects to the old sewer system. A relic from the city's founding. Most people don't even know it exists. She tapped the map, and a route was highlighted in blue light. Be at this rendezvous point at midnight. A contact will meet you and get you out of the city. Do you understand? Go to the museum. Midnight. We'll be there, Ash said, his voice flat and determined. This was a mission now. The objective was clear. Ash, Cynthia said, her voice softening for the first time. She glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Be careful. Paul isn't like your other rivals. He doesn't play by any rules but his own. And his new masters have given him tools you can't even imagine. The rest of the drive was silent. As they neared the outskirts of Eterna City, Cynthia pulled over. This is as far as I can take you. Getting my vehicle logged by city scanners would leave a trail. From here, you're on your own. Ash nodded. Thank you, Cynthia. For everything. Don't thank me yet, she said, her expression grim. Just survive. What you are, this new harmony, the world might not be ready for it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't deserve a chance to exist. He and Melody stepped out of the car, and it sped off, disappearing around a bend before they could blink. They were alone. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the approaching city. The distant hum of traffic was a low growl. I can feel them, Melody whispered, her hand gripping his arm. Her knuckles were white. Ash felt it too. It wasn't a specific location, but a general pressure. A net being cast. They weren't just looking for them, they were actively hurting them. Every major road out of the area would be watched. Every bus terminal, every train station. Cynthia was right. The city wasn't a choice, it was the only option left. It was the center of the trap. I know, Ash said, pulling up the hood of his tattered jacket. He gently nudged Pikachu, who was starting to stir. Okay, buddy. I need you awake. We've got company. Pikachu's eyes snapped open. He took one look at Ash's face, felt the tension thrumming through the bond, and was instantly alert. He scrambled onto Ash's shoulder, a low growl rumbling in his chest. They walked into Eterna City not as tourists, but as fugitives. Ash's heightened senses were a curse. The cacophony of 1,000 lives, 1,000 cars, 1,000 conversations, was an assault. But through the noise, he could feel the cold spots. The unnaturally quiet observers stationed on rooftops. The discreet black vans parked in alleyways, humming with electronic equipment. They were everywhere. He guided Melody through the crowds, his path seeming random, but it was anything but. He took them through a bustling open-air market, the crush of bodies and smells providing a momentary shield. He used the chaos, overturning a cart of cabbages, not by accident, but with a deliberate shove, to block the line of sight of two men in identical gray suits who were moving to intercept them. He ignored the vendors' angry shouts, his focus absolute. Survive. Sorry, he yelled over his shoulder, but he didn't stop. There are 4 of them closing in from the north, Melody said, her voice tight. She wasn't looking around. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted as if listening to a faraway sound. And 2 more from the east. They are communicating on a frequency, it hurts. Can you do anything about it? Ash asked, pulling her into a narrow alleyway between a bakery and a poke mart. The smell of fresh bread and sterile potions mingled in the air. Melody concentrated. A low, almost inaudible hum began to emanate from her, a pitch so high it was felt more than heard. Ash felt it as a clear, pure note in their shared resonance. Out in the street, one of the gray-suited men tapped his earpiece, wincing. Target is creating some kind of sonic interference, a voice crackled over the comms before dissolving into a burst of static. All units, switch to visual tracking. Pincer movement on Sector Gamma, 7. Ash risked a peek around the corner. He saw the agents moving, their coordination fluid and professional. They were herding them towards the city's center, towards the large, stately building of the Eterna Historical Museum. They weren't trying to capture them in the open. They wanted to isolate them. They're letting us run, Ash realized. They want us in the museum. It is a cage, Melody said, a tremor in her voice. This was her first experience with coordinated, human malice. It was a cold, ugly thing. Every cage has a door, Ash countered, his eyes scanning the rooftops. And they don't know we have the key. He met her gaze, his own certainty a rock for her to hold on to. We play their game, but by our rules. We get to the museum. We get to the tunnel. We get out. They broke cover, dashing across the street, drawing shouts from the agents. They were the bait, and they were sprinting right for the hook. The grand entrance of the museum loomed, its marble columns like the bars of a cage. They burst through the doors just as the last of the evening light faded. The museum was vast, cold, and silent. The main hall was a huge, echoing space, dominated by the colossal skeleton of an ancient pterodactyl suspended from the ceiling. The only light came from the dim, blue security lamps placed at long intervals, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted. The heavy main doors slammed shut behind them, the sound of a magnetic lock clicking into place echoing through the hall. They were sealed in. Show yourselves. Ash shouted into the darkness, his voice betraying no fear. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, landing in a defensive crouch, his cheeks sparking furiously. From the shadows of a far balcony, a figure emerged. He was silhouetted against a large window, the faint glow of the city lights outlining his familiar, spiky hair. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Ash, Paul's voice drifted down, laced with contempt. He wasn't alone. Aegis agents, clad in black tactical gear and armed with containment cannons, materialized from the shadows around the hall, their weapons aimed. Paul, Ash said, his voice level. It's been a while. I see you've traded in your Pokémon for a new set of toys. Paul descended the grand staircase, his steps slow and deliberate. He stopped a dozen paces from them. His eyes were colder than Ash remembered, devoid of any warmth or emotion. They were the eyes of a true believer. He didn't look at Ash at first. His gaze was fixed on Melody. So this is the source, Paul said, his voice a clinical drone. Anomaly designate, Meloetta. You have caused a great deal of trouble, entity. Her name is Melody, Ash snarled, stepping protectively in front of her. Paul finally looked at Ash, a flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps, in his eyes. Your sentimentality was always your greatest weakness, Ash. It seems you've allowed it to corrupt you on a biological level. The reports were fascinating. A symbiotic fusion. A shared life force. He gave a humorless smile. Tell me, when it sings, do you feel the compulsion to dance? I'm not in the mood for jokes, Paul, Ash said. Tell your men to stand down. We're leaving. Paul laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. You are in no position to make demands. You are an existential threat. A violation of the natural order. My orders are to contain you. Sever the bond. And study the results. His eyes gleamed with a fanatic's light. Imagine the applications. The power you've stumbled into, Ash, it could be harnessed. Stabilized. Used to enforce true order. You're insane, Melody whispered from behind Ash. Sanity is a matter of perspective, Paul shot back, his focus shifting back to her. The world is chaotic. It requires a firm hand. Your very existence threatens the balance. This union of divine and mortal, it is a disease. And we are the cure. You talk about order and balance, Ash said, his voice low and dangerous. But all I hear is a scared little man who's afraid of anything he can't control. He took a step forward, his presence suddenly immense, magnetic. The air in the room seemed to thicken around him. We are not a disease. We are not an experiment. We have a right to exist. And we are done running. Paul's cold demeanor finally cracked. A flash of pure fury crossed his face. So be it. He unclipped a poke ball from his belt. I was hoping to do this cleanly. But if you insist on being stubborn, Agent, no, one of the Aegis soldiers shouted. Our orders are non-lethal containment. Pokemon battle was not authorized. My authorization comes from a desire for results, Paul snapped, not taking his eyes off Ash. And I am the one who gets results. Electivire, stand by for battle. The pokeball opened, and the hulking form of Electivire materialized with a roar, its twin tails crackling with raw, yellow power. It slammed its fists together, the sound like a thunderclap in the echoing hall. This is your last chance, Ash, Paul said, his voice dropping to a growl. Surrender the anomaly. Ash looked at Melody. He felt her fear, but beneath it, a current of unwavering trust. He looked at Pikachu, whose small body was coiled like a spring, ready to unleash a thunderstorm. He looked back at Paul, at his rival, his tormentor, the ghost of a past he could now finally bury. His response was not a plea. It was a declaration. Get out of our way. So predictable, Paul sneered. Electivire, thunder. Pikachu, volt tackle. Straight ahead. Ash commanded. The two electrical attacks launched at the same moment. But they weren't aimed at each other. Electivire's massive bolt of lightning shot towards the ceiling, where it struck the metal harness holding the Aerodactyl skeleton. The ancient bones exploded in a shower of plaster and shrapnel, a devastating move designed to disorient and overwhelm. Pikachu, meanwhile, was not aiming at Electivire. Cloaked in golden energy, he rocketed past the larger Pokémon and slammed directly into Paul. It was a brilliant, unexpected move. Paul had been so focused on the Pokémon battle, he'd left himself open. The impact sent him stumbling back, gasping for air. The Aegis agents raised their cannons, but they hesitated, unsure of their target. Now, Pikachu. Quick attack. Ash yelled, using the chaos. Pikachu ricocheted off Paul, becoming a yellow blur that streaked through the Aegis agents. He wasn't attacking them. He was a distraction, a phantom, weaving between their legs, forcing them to turn, to break formation. Control yourselves. Paul roared, recovering his balance. It's one mouse. Box it in. Melody, now. Ash shouted. Melody, who had been huddled behind a large display case, closed her eyes. The high-frequency hum she'd produced earlier returned, but this time it was jagged, discordant. It pulsed, creating waves of sonic chaos that rattled the glass cases and, more importantly, scrambled the targeting sensors on the Aegis cannons. Red error messages flashed across the agents' heads-up displays. My targeting's offline, one yelled. Switch to manual. Fire at will. Paul screamed, his professional composure shredded. Containment foam and energy nets flew through the hall, but they were wild, undirected. Ash was already moving, grabbing Melody's hand. "This way." He pulled her behind the wreckage of a display on the history of mining, a cart full of glittering, worthless pyrite. "Pikachu, to me." Pikachu disengaged from the confused agents and raced to Ash's side. They were cornered. "Nowhere left to run, Ash." Paul gloated, striding forward, Electivire at his side. The agents were slowly regrouping, forming a semicircle. "We're not running," Ash said, his eyes gleaming with a strategic fire. He glanced at the mining cart, then at Electivire. Its motor drive ability. He remembered it well. It absorbed electric attacks to boost its speed. A powerful weapon. And a critical weakness. "Pikachu, listen to me," Ash whispered, his bond with his partner a clear channel of intent. "I want you to use Thunderbolt. Not on Electivire. On the cart. Hit the metal frame. Full power." Pikachu looked at him, confused, but the trust was absolute. He nodded. "It's over, Ash," Paul declared. "Electivire, use Giga Impact. End this." Electivire roared, cloaking itself in a swirling purple and gold aura, and charged. It was a finishing move, an unstoppable force. "Now, Pikachu!" Ash yelled. Pikachu unleashed a massive thunderbolt. It didn't strike Electivire. It struck the metal frame of the mining cart. The electricity, with nowhere to ground in the insulated museum floor, arced violently. And Electivire, with its motor drive ability, was a magnet for that energy. The raw, undirected electricity from the cart was pulled towards the charging Pokémon. It was too much, too unfocused. The Giga Impact aura sputtered. Electivire's body convulsed as it was hit with a tidal wave of chaotic, junk electricity. Its motor drive went into overdrive, not just boosting its speed, but overloading its entire nervous system. The massive Pokémon seized up, its eyes wide with shock, and crashed to the floor in a heap, smoke rising from its body, completely paralyzed. Paul froze, his face a mask of disbelief. He had been outthought. Utterly and completely. Ash didn't wait. "Go," he yelled, pushing Melody towards the back of the hall. They ran, leaving Paul standing in the middle of the room with his downed ace and his stunned, disorganized team. They found the door to the basement easily. It was unlocked. They plunged into the darkness below, the sounds of shouting and alarms fading behind them. They found the tunnel Cynthia had described, a round, brick-lined sewer entrance hidden behind a rusted boiler. They didn't hesitate. They climbed inside, pulling the heavy grate closed just as footsteps clattered on the stairs above. Back in the main hall, Paul stood motionless. His men were securing the area, but their movements were hesitant, their confidence shattered. He stared at the spot where Ash and the anomaly had disappeared. He had come here expecting to fight a monster. A rabid, powerful, but ultimately predictable threat. He had planned for it, brought overwhelming force, and controlled the battlefield. And he had lost. He hadn't been overpowered. He had been dismantled. Ash hadn't fought like a cornered animal. He had fought like a general. His moves were precise, his goals clear. He had used the environment, his opponent's abilities, even Paul's own arrogance, against him. That wasn't the Ash he knew. The hot-headed, sentimental fool was gone. In his place was something more. Something controlled, decisive, and sovereign. An agent approached him, holding a datapad. "Sir. The targets have escaped into the old sewer network. We can seal the exits and..." "No," Paul said, his voice flat. "Let them go." The agent stared. "Sir. But our orders are now irrelevant," Paul cut him off. He looked at his paralyzed Electivire, then back at the dark, empty space where Ash had stood. He had failed. Humiliatingly. But in that failure, a new, unsettling thought began to form. His mission had been to contain an anomaly that threatened the natural order. But the being he had just faced wasn't chaos. It was a new, terrifying kind of order. A king protecting his queen. An entity asserting its right to exist. He had looked into the face of the anomaly, and he had seen a leader. He had looked at his own reflection in the polished museum floor and seen only a ghost. He turned away from the agent, his mind racing. He had a report to file. It would be clinical. Factual. AETs demonstrated unforeseen tactical capabilities. Evaded containment. Proceeding to Phase 2 tracking protocols. But as he typed, his fingers felt cold and foreign. The official report would say one thing. His memory would scream another. For the first time in his career, for the first time since joining the Aegis Division, Paul questioned his mission. He had been sent to cage a monster, but he was beginning to suspect he had just tried to put a leash on a god. Chapter 4, The Garden of Whispers. The sewers of Eterna City were a labyrinth of cold stone and forgotten history. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, a stark contrast to the sterile, hostile environment of the museum. For Ash and Melody, it was a sanctuary. They moved in silence for what felt like hours, guided by the faint blue line on Cynthia's map, which still hovered above Ash's wrist from a microprojector she must have slipped onto his jacket. The adrenaline of the chase slowly bled away, leaving behind a deep, bone-wearying exhaustion. Ash's new, heightened senses, which had been a tactical advantage, were now a torment. The drip of water from a leaky pipe was like a hammer blow. The distant rumble of the city above was a constant, oppressive weight. He could feel the skittering of 100 rotata in the walls, their tiny, nervous heartbeats a frantic, maddening rhythm. But through the sensory chaos, one signal remained clear and pure: Melody. Her presence, a steady, harmonic hum beside him, was the anchor in his storm. He could feel her fear slowly subsiding, replaced by a weary relief and a deep, resonant gratitude that pulsed from her to him. She clung to his arm, not just for support, but for connection, her physical touch a grounding force for them both. Pikachu, recovered from his deep sleep but still drained, trotted at their heels. His usual cheerful demeanor was gone, replaced by a grim, soldierly focus. He understood, on a primal level, that their world had changed. The game was no longer about badges, it was about survival. After what felt like an eternity, the blue line on Ash's map led them to a rusted, circular grate in the ceiling of a wide junction. A single, bare bulb cast a weak, yellow light from somewhere above. This was the rendezvous. It was exactly midnight. Ash reached up, his fingers finding purchase on the cold, rusted metal. He pushed. The grate was heavy, but it moved with a low groan of protest. Cool, fresh air, smelling of pine needles and damp soil, washed over them. It was the scent of freedom. He boosted Melody up first. Her movements were lithe, graceful even when scrambling out of a sewer. She turned and offered him a hand, and he was struck by the simple, human gesture. He took her hand, the now familiar jolt of their connection a welcome reassurance, and pulled himself up. Pikachu scrambled up after him. They were not in the city. They were in a dense, ancient forest, the kind that felt untouched by human hands for centuries. The moonlight filtered through the towering pines, painting the forest floor in shifting patterns of silver and black. A few feet away, a man stood waiting, his form cloaked in a simple brown robe, his face hidden in the shadows of his hood. At his side stood a serene-looking Zatu, its unblinking eyes seeming to stare into 3 times at once, past, present, and future. "You are the one Cynthia sent," the man said. His voice was calm, a gentle baritone that seemed to absorb the tension in the air. "I am Kale. Welcome to the Whispering Garden of Gracidia." Ash's hand instinctively went to the poke balls on his belt, his posture wary. "How do we know we can trust you?" Kale didn't seem offended. The Zatu at his side ruffled its green feathers, but remained still. "Cynthia trusts me," Kale said simply. And at this moment, you have little choice but to trust her judgment. The Aegis division has sealed every exit from Eterna. This was the only way out. He gestured deeper into the woods. The garden is shielded. Here, you will be safe. For a time. With no other options, they followed. Kale led them down a winding, barely their path. The forest grew thicker, the trees older and more gnarled. A strange, peaceful energy permeated the air, a stark contrast to the hostile tension of the city. Ash felt the frantic edge of his senses begin to soften. The constant, grating noise of the outside world faded, replaced by a gentle, harmonious hum that seemed to emanate from the very soil. It was like their own bond, but magnified 1,000 times, a chorus where they were just two notes. "What is this place?" Melody asked, her voice filled with a quiet awe. She could feel the life energy here, pure and strong. "It is a sanctuary," Kale explained, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. "A refuge for those who are different. Humans who have formed bonds with Pokémon that go beyond training. People who can speak to them, who share their senses, who are, in some way, intertwined with the world in a way most are not." He glanced back at them, his eyes, barely visible in his hood, seeming to hold a deep well of understanding. "It is a place for people like you." They emerged into a vast, hidden valley. It was a place of breathtaking, impossible beauty. A gentle waterfall cascaded down a cliff face into a crystal-clear lake. The shores were dotted with simple, elegant structures built of wood and stone, seamlessly integrated into the landscape. Flowers bloomed in vibrant, unnatural colors, and Ash recognized several species of Gracidia flowers among them, their petals glowing with a soft, internal light. Pokémon of all types roamed freely, mingling with the robed humans who moved among them with a quiet, peaceful purpose. A herd of deerling drank from the lake beside a man who seemed to be listening to the water. A woman sat meditating under a tree, a flock of swablu nestled in her hair and on her shoulders. This was not just a hidden village. It was a living ecosystem of human Pokémon harmony. They were met with curious stares as Kale led them towards the center of the valley. The residents of the garden could feel their unique energy, the tight, powerful, singular note of their bond. It was different from the looser, more varied connections they shared with their own partners. Ash and Melody were not two beings in harmony, they were a single song in two bodies. It was a source of both wonder and a faint, primal fear. Kale led them to a small, simple house set near the base of the waterfall. "You will stay here," he said. "Rest. Recover. No one will harm you in the garden." His Zada gave a single, sharp cry, then fell silent. Kale paused, as if listening to a message only he could hear. "The Aegis agent. Paul, he has reported your escape, but he has classified your threat level as indeterminate. He is arguing with his superiors. It seems your display in the museum gave him pause. You have bought yourself time." With that, he and his Zada turned and walked away, melting back into the peaceful rhythm of the village. The small house was sparse but comfortable. A simple bed, a low table, and a window that looked out onto the glowing Gracidia flowers. The exhaustion they had been holding at bay for so long came crashing down. Pikachu was already curled up on a soft rug, fast asleep. Melody walked to the window, staring out at the impossible beauty of the garden. "I have never seen a place like this," she whispered. "In all my time as Meloetta, I observed humanity from a distance. I saw their cities, their conflicts, their art. But this harmony, it is what my song has always yearned for." Ash came to stand beside her. The tension from the chase had left deep lines of fatigue on his face. He watched the gentle, peaceful scene, and for the first time, the full weight of his old life, his old ambition, hit him. "They're happy here," he said quietly. "Content. They're not trying to be the best. They're not trying to win a league." Melody turned to him, sensing the conflict warring within him. "Does that seem so bad?" "No," he admitted, shaking his head. It's just, different. My whole life has been about moving forward. The next gym, the next challenge, the next adventure. This place, it's about being still. I don't know how to do that. Perhaps, she said softly, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining naturally, it is something we must learn together. The next few days were a lesson in stillness. They explored the garden, speaking with its residents. They met a woman named Alara who could see through the eyes of her noctowl, and a young man named Reese whose emotions directly influenced the weather around his caste form. Each person was a unique variation on a theme, a different kind of harmony. They were welcomed, but with a cautious distance. Ash and Melody were something new, an unknown quantity. Their power, felt so keenly in the museum, was a palpable force even in its dormancy. It made the other residents nervous. The real education, however, came from within. Melody, with the patience of a timeless being, began to teach Ash about the bond they shared. It is not just a link, she explained one afternoon as they sat by the lake. It is a circuit. Energy flows between us. Life force. Emotion. Intent. When you fought Paul, you were not just using your own intuition. You were drawing on my nature. I am a being of harmony, of patterns. You saw the patterns of the battle, the flow of energy, and you used it. She guided him through meditative exercises. She taught him to consciously feel the flow, to not just be a passive recipient of her emotions, but to sense the intent behind them. He, in turn, began to teach her about being human. It happened in small, unexpected moments. He introduced her to the simple joy of a perfectly cooked meal, prepared by one of the garden's residents. The look on her face as she tasted a warm vegetable stew was the same look of wondrous discovery she'd had with the oran berry, but deeper, more complex. He saw her laugh for the first time, a bright, melodic sound, when a playful Pachirisu stole a piece of bread from her hand and she engaged it in a gentle tug-of-war. He also saw her struggle. The garden was peaceful, but it was not without its own quiet dramas. Two residents had a disagreement, their voices raised in anger. Melody flinched as if struck, her hands flying to her ears. "What is that?" she gasped, her face pale. "That, dissonance. It's ugly. It's called an argument," Ash explained gently, guiding her away. "People don't always agree. They get angry. It's part of being human. But it breaks the harmony," she said, clearly distressed. "Sometimes," Ash said, finding the words carefully, "you have to break the harmony to find a new one. A better one." He was beginning to understand that her perspective was both a great strength and a profound weakness. She saw the world in terms of pure harmony and dissonance. She had no framework for the messy, contradictory, beautiful gray areas of human emotion. Jealousy, petty annoyance, sarcastic humor, these were alien concepts to her. He found himself in the strange position of being a tour guide for the human soul. Their own connection deepened with every shared experience. The bond was no longer just a hum in his bones, it was a constant, silent conversation. He knew when she was sad without her saying a word. She could feel his frustration at his own helplessness, and would often place a calming hand on his arm, the gesture more effective than any spoken platitude. One evening, they sat on the porch of their small house, watching the twin moons of the Sinnoh region rise over the valley. The Gracidia flowers had opened, and their gentle, otherworldly glow bathed the garden in a soft, ethereal light. Pikachu was asleep at their feet, his tiny chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. A comfortable silence stretched between them. It was a silence filled not with tension, but with understanding. Ash found himself looking at her, not as a former deity or a partner in survival, but as Melody. The girl who found wonder in the taste of bread. The woman who carried the weight of a god's sacrifice in her weary, beautiful eyes. The person who understood him more completely than anyone ever had. "Sing for me," he said, the words coming out before he had a chance to think about them. She looked at him, surprised. I haven't truly sung since you saved me, he finished for her. I know. But that was a song of power. A song of sacrifice. I want to hear your song. She hesitated for a long moment. Then, a slow smile touched her lips. She turned to face him, her musical note eyes locking with his. And she began to sing. It was not the relic song. It was not a song of power or creation. It was quiet, simple, and heartbreakingly beautiful. It was a melody of discovery, of loss, of a timeless existence traded for a finite one. It was a song of the texture of bark on her fingers, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the baffling sting of a minor disagreement, the simple, profound joy of a shared meal. It was the story of her journey from Meloetta to melody, a song written just for him, in that moment. The music flowed into him, not through his ears, but through their bond. He felt every emotion woven into the notes, the loneliness of her eons of observation, the terror of her sacrifice, the wonder of her new senses, and a final, rising, soaring note of affection. A deep, unwavering affection directed entirely at him. When the last note faded into the soft light of the Gracidia flowers, neither of them moved. The space between them was charged with an emotion that had no name, a harmony more powerful than any they had felt before. He saw his own awe, his own burgeoning affection, reflected in her eyes. This was not the product of a crisis. This was not a side effect of their bond. This was real. This was a connection forged in the quiet moments, in the shared laughter and the patient teaching. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their first kiss was not a fiery, passionate explosion. It was a gentle, tentative press of lips, as soft and as wondrous as her song. It was a question and an answer, a promise and a fulfillment. It was the moment their two notes, which had been playing in harmony, finally merged into a single, perfect chord. But even in a place as shielded as the garden, discord could find a way to seep in. Their idyllic peace was shattered the next morning. A commotion near the center of the village drew them out of their house. A small crowd of residents was gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and anger. In the center of the crowd stood Cale, his face grim, and another man, a tall, gaunt figure named Loris. Loris was one of the few residents who kept to himself, a man whose connection was with ghost-type Pokemon. He was often seen muttering to the shadows, his face etched with a permanent, haunted anxiety. Loris was shaking, his eyes wide with terror. I hear them. I hear the whispers. He cried, his voice shrill. They come from the shadows. From the cracks in the world. Calm yourself, Loris, Cale said, his voice firm but gentle. I can't. Loris shrieked, pointing a trembling finger directly at Melody. It's her. She's the source. The whispers say she is a dissonance. An impurity that weakens the walls. They say if the source is silenced, the shadows will be calm again. They promise safety. Ash stepped in front of Melody immediately, his body tense. What are you talking about? What whispers? Loris recoiled from him. The whispers from the other side. The world of no rules. The place of the renegade. He is angry. Her song, her new being, it has disturbed his balance. He sees her as a flaw in creation. He promises to protect us, to restore order, if we just correct the error. A cold, heavy dread settled in Ash's stomach. The renegade. The world of no rules. Giratina. His influence was not a battering ram against the garden's walls. It was a poison, a whisper in the ear of the most fearful, the most unstable. It was turning the garden's own residents against them. Before anyone could react, a scream cut through the air. It came from the perimeter of the valley. One of the garden's patrols, a young woman with a partner Luxray, came sprinting into the village, her face as white as a ghost. At the western ridge, she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. We found someone. An Aegis agent. Kale and a few others ran with her, Ash and Melody close behind. They reached the edge of the sanctuary, where the forest grew wild and the garden's protective barrier was strongest. There, lying half-hidden in the undergrowth, was the body. It was one of Paul's agents, dressed in the same gray suit Ash had seen in Eterna City. He must have slipped past Cynthia's misdirection and tracked them here, a secret scout sent to pinpoint their location. But he was dead. There were no wounds on his body. No signs of a struggle. No indication of a Pokémon attack. His skin was a pale, waxy gray, his eyes open and staring at nothing, his face frozen in an expression of pure, absolute terror. His life force had been drained. Siphoned away until nothing was left but a hollow, empty shell. And all over his uniform, faint and barely visible, were swirling, shadowy marks, like the ghostly imprint of tendrils made from solidified nightmare. The whispers in Loris's mind had just been given a terrifying, physical form. Giratina was no longer just watching. He was reaching. And his touch meant oblivion. Chapter 5, The Two-Front War. The dead Aegis agent was a silent, screaming testament. Giratina was no longer an abstract threat, a whisper in the dark. He was a physical presence, his influence a lethal poison seeping through the cracks in the garden's defenses. The sight of the life-drained corpse sent a wave of cold, visceral fear through the assembled residents. The shadowy marks on the uniform were a language everyone in this hidden valley understood, the touch of the distortion world. Loris, the haunted man who had first heard the whispers, let out a strangled sob. I told you. I told you he was here. This is a warning. He is protecting the border. That man was a trespasser, and he was corrected. He turned his wild, terrified eyes on Melody. The next correction will be for the one who drew his gaze here in the first place. A murmur of fear and agreement rippled through the small crowd. The harmony of the garden, so carefully cultivated for generations, was fracturing. The residents looked at Melody not with awe or curiosity anymore, but with suspicion and terror. She was the focal point of a god's wrath. That is enough, Loris, Kale's voice cut through the rising panic, sharp and authoritative. He stood over the body, his face a mask of grim analysis. The Zatu at his side was stock still, its head cocked, staring at something beyond the veil of reality. Fear is the weapon our enemy uses. Do not hand it to him willingly. He turned to Ash, his gaze heavy. The agent's equipment is still active. It is sending a continuous, low-level tracking signal. His superiors will know he stopped moving. They will know his life sign ceased. They will interpret it as a hostile action. They will be here within hours. The words landed like hammer blows. An army at the gates, and a god trying to tear the world apart from the inside. We are caught between a rising tide and a hurricane, Ash said, his voice low. He felt a surge of Melody's fear through their bond, a cold, sharp spike. He squeezed her hand, a silent message of reassurance he didn't entirely feel himself. His mind was already racing, the battlefield expanding in his mind. Two fronts. Two enemies. One driven by rigid, mortal order, the other by divine, imbalanced fury. The garden's barrier will not hold against a full-scale assault, Kale stated, confirming Ash's grim assessment. It was designed to deter, to hide, not to be a fortress wall. And with Giratina's influence weakening it from within, he didn't need to finish. A choice had to be made. Run, and be hunted across the globe. Or stand and fight, here, in the one place that was supposed to be a sanctuary. For Ash, it wasn't a choice at all. This was his responsibility. Their presence had brought this crisis to the garden's doorstep. He couldn't, wouldn't, abandon these people to face it alone. Then we don't hide, Ash declared, his voice ringing with a sudden, undeniable authority that made even Kale turn and look at him. The boy who had arrived as a fugitive was gone. In his place stood a commander. We fight. The next few hours were a blur of frantic, organized activity. The Garden of Gracidia transformed from a peaceful commune into a military encampment. The quiet, gentle residents, who had spent their lives in meditative harmony, now looked to Ash for direction, their fear tempered by the sheer force of his will. He didn't shout orders, he spoke with a calm, decisive clarity that cut through the panic. His mind, sharpened by his bond with melody, saw the garden not as a home, but as a defensible position. The waterfall was a natural barrier. The narrow valley entrance was a choke point. The dense forest was perfect for ambushes. He moved through the valley, his every word a strategic placement. "Elara," he said to the woman with the noctowl, "I need you in the high ridges. You're our eyes. I don't want to see them when they arrive, I want to see them when they're still 10 miles out. Report every move." "Reese," he said to the young man with the cast form, "your ability to influence weather is about to become our greatest asset. I need fog. As thick as you can make it, concentrated at the valley entrance. They can't shoot what they can't see." He coordinated with Kale, deploying residents and their Pokémon partners in defensive positions, turning their unique, harmonious abilities into tactical weapons. A man who could communicate with grass types organized a line of tan growth, their vines weaving into a living, resilient barricade. A woman whose bond with a group of sandshrew allowed her to sense vibrations in the earth became their early warning system for ground troops. Melody stayed by his side, a silent but crucial partner. She was the amplifier for his abilities. With her near, he could not only see the battlefield, but feel it. He could feel the morale of his new, makeshift army. He could feel the growing anxiety, but also the rising determination. He could also feel the other, darker presence. A cold, creeping dread that coiled in the shadows at the edge of his perception, a constant, malevolent hum beneath the harmony of the garden. Giratina was watching. Waiting. As dusk began to fall, Elara's voice, filtered through a psychic link with Kale's Zatu, echoed in their minds. "They are here. 10 Condor-class assault vehicles. At least 100 ground troops. They are not slowing. They are deploying for a full-scale breach." Reese did his work. A thick, unnatural fog rolled down from the mountains, blanketing the valley entrance in a shroud of gray. It bought them time. The first attack was not a subtle infiltration. It was a statement of overwhelming force. A concussive blast, a sonic cannon designed to disorient, ripped through the fog. The sound was brutal, a physical blow that shook the trees and sent a wave of panic through the defenders. Ash felt it as a raw, ugly burst of static in his bond with Melody, causing her to cry out and stumble. "Hold the line!" Ash yelled, his own head ringing. "They're trying to break our concentration. They're blind. Make them pay for it." Through the fog, the hulking shapes of Aegis soldiers in advanced combat armor emerged, their rifles firing streams of containment foam and stun charges. "Now!" Ash commanded. From the trees, a coordinated attack. A dozen Victreebel spat razor leaf, not at the soldiers, but at the trees above them, sending a shower of heavy branches crashing down. A wave of stun spore from a line of Vileplume drifted into the fog, a silent, paralytic cloud. The Aegis advance faltered, their technological superiority negated by the guerrilla tactics of the forest itself. The battle for the valley entrance was fierce and brutal. Ash was everywhere, a whirlwind of command and action. He moved with Pikachu at his side, the small mouse now a blur of yellow lightning, his attacks precise and devastating. An electro ball to disable a weapon, a quick attack to topple a commander, an iron tail to shatter the visor of an armored soldier. Ash wasn't just directing the battle, he was a part of it, his instincts and Melody's harmonic awareness blending into a perfect, deadly dance. They were holding. Impossibly, they were holding. The technologically superior Aegis force was being bled for every inch of ground, their assault bogged down in the fog and traps of the garden. The commander of the Aegis force, a hard-faced woman on a floating command platform hovering just above the fog, grew frustrated. "Commander," an aide said, "their resistance is unexpectedly coordinated. The leader, the AET Prime, he's fighting like a veteran general. I don't care if he's Arceus himself, the commander snarled. I have my orders. Paul's sentimentality compromised the primary objective. We are not here to contain. We are here to cleanse. Deploy the golems. From the back of the Aegis line, two massive, bipedal mechs, each 3 times the size of a Rhyperior, lumbered forward. They were walking siege engines, their arms tipped with plasma cutters and heavy sonic cannons. Fire, the commander ordered. The golems raised their arms, and the world dissolved into noise and fire. They didn't aim at the defenders. They aimed at the valley walls. The plasma cutters sliced through ancient trees and stone, sending avalanches of rock and burning timber down into the defensive lines. The sonic cannons fired wide, concussive blasts that tore the Tangrowth barricades to shreds and sent defenders flying. It was a tactic of pure, indiscriminate destruction. Chaos erupted. The defensive line broke. The Aegis soldiers, shielded from the debris by the golem's mass, surged forward. Ash saw his carefully constructed defense crumbling. He needed to take out those golems. Pikachu, with me, he yelled, breaking cover and sprinting towards the chaos. But as he moved, a new, more terrifying crisis unfolded behind him. In the center of the village, far from the main battle, Loris had gathered a small, terrified group of residents. His face was slick with sweat, his eyes glowing with a feverish, desperate light. He had succumbed completely to the whispers. The renegade is angry, he preached, his voice rising to a frantic crescendo. He sees the violence, the destruction. It is because the dissonance is still here. The garden is being torn apart to get to the source. But we can end it. The whispers told me how. A peace offering. If we sever the impurity, the renegade will be appeased, and the invaders will have no one left to hunt. We will be saved. He was holding a strange, dark, obsidian shard, covered in twisted, ancient runes. It pulsed with a cold, shadowy energy. It was an artifact of the distortion world, something that should not exist in this reality. His followers, their minds clouded by fear and the insidious poison of Giratina's promises, surrounded a terrified Melody. She had been directing some of the non-combatants, helping the wounded, when they had cornered her. Loris, no, she pleaded, her voice trembling. This is what it wants. It wants discord. It wants us to turn on each other. It wants balance. Loris screamed, raising the shard high. And you are the imbalance. For the good of the garden, your bond must be broken. Your song must be silenced. He began to chant in a guttural, ancient language, the runes on the shard glowing with a malevolent purple light. The air around Melody grew cold. A vortex of shadow began to swirl at her feet, not a physical force, but a spiritual one, pulling at the very essence of her being, at the bond that tied her to Ash. Out on the battlefield, Ash felt it like a physical blow. A searing, tearing pain erupted in his chest. The world went gray at the edges. The hum, the song that was a constant in his soul, wavered, becoming a discordant, painful shriek. He stumbled, clutching his heart, a cry of agony ripping from his throat. Melody. He whipped around. Through the smoke and chaos, he could see it. The dark vortex of energy swirling in the heart of the village. He could feel her terror, her pain, her essence being pulled and stretched to the breaking point. He was caught. The golems were shattering his army at the front, and the heart of his world was being torn out from behind. A war on two fronts. Rage, pure and absolute, burned away the pain. It was a cold, clarifying fire. He saw the battlefield with a terrible, new clarity. He saw the advancing golems. He saw Loris and his ritual. He saw the terrified faces of the people he was trying to protect, some of whom were now trying to destroy the person he loved. He had to make a choice. Save the garden, or save Melody. For Ash Ketchum, it was no choice at all. Pikachu, he roared, his voice filled with a power that made the air tremble. Thunderbolt. Full power. Target the golem's right leg joint. Pikachu, sensing his partner's desperation, unleashed the most powerful thunderbolt of his life. It was a spear of pure, white-hot lightning that struck the golem's leg with pinpoint accuracy. The advanced alloy buckled and melted, and the giant mech crashed to its side with a scream of tearing metal. But Ash was already turning his back on the battle. He was sprinting, faster than he had ever run, back towards the village, back towards Melody. He was abandoning the fight. He was abandoning the garden to its fate. He ran past the shocked faces of the defenders he had just been leading, his focus narrowed to a single point. The pain of the severing ritual was intensifying. It felt like his soul was being ripped in two. He could feel Melody weakening, her light dimming. He burst into the village square, a whirlwind of desperate fury. "Loris," he screamed, his voice a raw, primal roar of a protector whose charge was threatened. Loris looked up from his chant, his face a mask of insane righteousness. "You see. You are nothing without her. We are setting you free. You're killing her." Ash bellowed. He charged. Loris's followers, their faces blank with fear-driven conviction, tried to block his path. He didn't even slow down. He moved through them, not with malice, but with the unstoppable force of a natural disaster. He wasn't the boy from Pallet Town anymore. He was a king, and they were trying to harm his queen. He reached the circle just as Loris raised the shard for a final, severing strike. Ash launched himself forward, tackling Loris with the force of a Tauros. The shard flew from Loris's hand, skittering across the stone ground. The dark energy vortex dissipated instantly. The pain in Ash's chest subsided, replaced by a throbbing ache. He scrambled to Melody's side. She was pale, translucent, her form flickering like a dying flame. She was conscious, but barely. "Ash," she whispered, her voice a faint echo. He held her, pouring his own energy, his own will to live, back into their bond, trying to stabilize the tearing harmony. But the battle was not over. In the moment of distraction, the second golem had broken through the last of the defenses. It lumbered into the village square, its cannons raising, targeting the gathered, terrified residents. The Aegis commander's voice boomed from its external speakers, cold and merciless. "All non-combatants will be pacified. All resistance will be eradicated. This sanctuary is now under Aegis control." Ash looked up from the ground where he cradled a fading Melody. He saw the golem aiming its weapon not at him, but at the very people he had just abandoned the battle to save, including the ones who had just tried to kill his love. His face, smeared with dirt and sweat, hardened into a mask of cold, absolute fury. He had tried to be a general. He had tried to be a protector. They had forced him to choose. Now, he would show them what they had truly unleashed. Not a leader. A force of nature. He gently laid Melody down, stood up, and faced the giant mech, Pikachu landing on the ground beside him, bristling with shared rage. "You want the anomaly?" Ash's voice was dangerously quiet, yet it carried over the sounds of chaos. "You want the source of the power?" He held out his hand, and a visible aura of golden-green light, the pure, untamed energy of his bond with Melody, began to coalesce around him. "Come and get it." Chapter 6, A Descent into Discord. The golden-green aura pulsing around Ash was not an attack. It was a declaration. It was the raw, untamed power of his bond with Melody made manifest, a beacon of defiance in the chaos-choked village square. The Aegis commander, watching through the golem's optical sensors, saw not just a boy, but a living, breathing nexus of energy she could not quantify. Her mission parameters were simple: cleanse, pacify, control. This raw, sovereign power fit into none of those categories. It had to be extinguished. Target AET Prime, her voice boomed from the golem speakers, devoid of emotion. Maximum force. The golem's plasma cannon whined, charging for a kill shot. But Ash wasn't looking at the golem anymore. He was looking past it, into the deep, churning shadows that the battle had stirred up. He could feel it. The cold, reptilian attention of the other, greater enemy. Giratina had been a whisper, a poison. Now, witnessing the raw, unchecked display of Ash and Melody's combined power, its interest had become direct. The plasma cannon fired. A beam of pure, searing energy shot across the square. Ash didn't even flinch. At the last possible second, a wall of solid, shimmering pink energy erupted from the ground, absorbing the blast with a deafening sizzle. The psychic shield wavered, then held. From the crowd of stunned villagers, Kale stepped forward, his eyes closed in concentration, his hands outstretched. His Zadu stood beside him, its body glowing with the same pink light. They had intercepted the shot, but the effort had cost them. Kale stumbled, blood trickling from his nose. "We will not let you fight alone," he panted, his voice strained but resolute. The other garden residents, shocked out of their fear-induced paralysis by both Loris's betrayal and Ash's defiance, rallied behind him. Their Pokémon partners stepped forward, battered but not broken, forming a ragged line of defense. But Giratina had seen enough. It had offered a bargain, silenced the dissonance in exchange for safety, and Loris had failed. It had watched the mortals and their machines tear at each other, creating a symphony of chaos that grated on its sense of cosmic order. This messy, passionate, chaotic conflict was everything it abhorred. And at the center of it all was the bond, that vibrant, golden-green light that defied every rule of existence. It was a beautiful, powerful, wrong note in the song of reality. It decided to intervene directly. A shadow in the center of the village square deepened, growing unnaturally dark. It was the shadow cast by the village's central well. It began to twist, to writhe. A cold that was not of this world bled outwards, and the air grew thick with the smell of ozone and static, the signature scent of a dimensional breach. From the inky blackness, a single, shadowy tendril, made of solidified nightmare and tipped with a crimson spike, lashed out. It didn't go for Ash. It didn't go for the weakened Melody. It went for Pikachu. The tendril moved with impossible speed, a flicker of motion too fast for the eye to track. It bypassed the golem, ignored the defenders, and wrapped itself around Pikachu's small, furry body. Pika. A cry of pure shock and terror. "Buddy!" Ash screamed, reaching out. It was too late. The tendril snapped back, yanking Pikachu off his feet and dragging him into the swirling vortex of shadow that was now a gaping maw in the ground. The portal to the distortion world. No. Ash's roar was pure, undiluted agony. The world seemed to slow down. He saw Pikachu's terrified face, his red cheeks sparking uselessly against the shadowy appendage. He saw the portal, a swirling mess of inverted colors and broken physics. And he felt Giratina's intent, a cold, clear thought that pierced his mind like a shard of ice: you value your companions. Your bonds give you strength. So I will take them. One by one. Until you are broken. It wasn't an act of rage. It was a tactic. A cold, calculated, cruel maneuver to shatter his resolve. Giratina had identified his greatest strength, and in doing so, had found his greatest weakness. The Aegis commander, watching the impossible scene unfold, was momentarily stunned. What is this new energy reading? Unidentified dimensional rift. All units, maintain positions. Do not engage the anomaly. But Ash wasn't listening. His world had narrowed to that single, horrifying image, Pikachu, being dragged into hell. He did not hesitate. As the last of Pikachu's tail disappeared into the vortex, Ash ran, and with a desperate, flying leap, he dove in right after him. Ash! Melody screamed, her voice suddenly strong, laced with terror. The shock of Pikachu's abduction and Ash's suicidal dive had jolted her, overriding her own weakness. She pushed herself to her feet, her form still flickering, and without a second's thought, she threw herself into the portal as well. The rift snapped shut as quickly as it had opened, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The Aegis golem stood frozen, its tactical computer unable to process what it had just witnessed. Kale and the gardener stared at the empty space where their defenders had been. The two-front war had ended in the most unpredictable way imaginable. Their champions, and their enemies, were simply gone. To call the distortion world a place was a gross oversimplification. Ash's first sensation was not of falling, but of becoming. His sense of up and down vanished. The air, if it could be called that, was thick and syrupy, and it tasted of regret and static electricity. Gravity was a local ordinance, subject to change without notice. He tumbled through a nauseating, kaleidoscopic void. Shards of crystalline platforms drifted by like malevolent icebergs. Twisted, skeletal trees grew upside down from floating islands of gray, featureless rock. In the distance, waterfalls flowed upwards, their water a sickly, greenish color, disappearing into an ever-present, bruised purple sky that had no sun, no moons, no stars. This was not a world. This was a wound in reality. He slammed into something solid, a floating, horizontal slab of dark, glassy rock, with a force that knocked the wind out of him. He lay there, gasping, his mind reeling from the sensory whiplash. The golden-green aura that had surrounded him was gone, suppressed by the overwhelming wrongness of this dimension. A moment later, Melody landed beside him, not with a crash, but with a soft, graceful impact that still sent her tumbling. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with a primal, cosmic terror. "This place," she whispered, her voice trembling. It is the echo of a scream. It is everything that is not in harmony." As a being of pure harmony, being here was torture for her. Ash could feel it through their bond, a constant, grating static, a high-pitched whine at the edge of her consciousness that threatened to drive her mad. It was like forcing a master musician to listen to an orchestra where every instrument was deliberately, painfully out of tune. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice raw. She shook her head, clutching her temples. "My song. I cannot find the notes here. The air itself is discord." But there was no time for adjustment. He had to find Pikachu. He pushed himself to his feet, scanning the impossible landscape. He could see the shadowy tendril, a smear of darkness against the chaotic background, dragging his friend deeper into the dimension. "We have to go," he said, his voice a grim anchor in the swirling madness. He grabbed her hand, the physical contact a desperate attempt to reinforce their own, private harmony against the overwhelming dissonance of the world around them. Their journey was a nightmare traverse. They leaped from one floating platform to another, sometimes having to wait for a new island to drift into range. The physics were a constant, lethal puzzle. On one platform, gravity might be twice what was normal, making his limbs feel like lead. A single step onto the next, and gravity might reverse, threatening to send them tumbling into the violet nothingness below. The dimension itself was hostile. The very air seemed to watch them. Ash saw movement in the corner of his eye, and when he turned, the rock formation seemed to twist into half-remembered shapes. A brief, fleeting image of the Celadon gym, with Erica's smiling face. A flash of the Lumio City Tower, glittering in the sun. The world was weaponizing his own memories against him, trying to distract, to disorient. But then, the illusions grew more personal. More cruel. As they rounded a spire of crystallized shadow, a figure blocked their path. It was a girl with honey blonde hair, wearing a familiar red and black outfit. Her name was a half-forgotten ache in his chest. "Serena." "Ash," the shadow clone whispered, her voice a perfect imitation. "You left me. You promised you'd see me again. Why did you leave me?" Ash froze. The image was perfect, the emotional appeal a knife to the gut. But through his bond with Melody, he felt a surge of her pure, analytical perception. "It is not real," her thought was a clear bell in his mind. It is a puppet. A chord of memory, played to cause you pain. Look at its energy. It is hollow. He forced himself to see what she saw. The figure of Serena was just a shell, a shimmering construct of dimensional energy and stolen memories. There was no life force, no soul. Just a cold, empty vessel. You're not her, Ash said, his voice cold. He pushed past the illusion, refusing to give it power. The shadow clone flickered and dissolved into a puff of gray dust. They were being tested. Hunted. Giratina wasn't just leading them on a chase, it was a psychological assault, a systematic attempt to break them down before the final confrontation. Next, it was Melody's turn. A figure materialized before her, a perfect, radiant copy of her old self. Meloetta, in her aria for me, her voice a song of cosmic power. You are weak, the illusion sang, its melody a twisted, mocking version of her own. You traded divinity for a fragile, mortal shell. For him. He will die, and you will fade with him. You have doomed yourself for nothing. Melody faltered, the word striking at her deepest insecurities. The constant pain of being in this dimension, combined with the vision of what she had given up, was almost too much. She stumbled, her own form flickering. Ash grabbed her, his grip firm, his presence a bulwark. Don't listen to it, he ordered. He couldn't analyze the energy the way she could, but he could feel the intent. It was a lie, crafted to wound. You are not weak. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You saved my life. You saved the world. That thing is just an echo. You are the song. His words, his absolute, unwavering belief in her, cut through the illusion's power. Melody looked from the radiant, empty vision of her past to the fierce, determined face of her present. She found her anchor. Her own form solidified, the flickering stopped. She straightened up, her eyes clear. He is right, she said, her voice quiet but firm. She and Ash walked straight through the illusion, which shattered like glass. The psychological attacks grew more desperate, more vicious. They saw shadow clones of Brock and Misty, accusing them of forgetting their oldest friends. They saw Professor Oak, his kindly face twisted into a mask of disappointment, berating Ash for abandoning his potential. They saw Ash's mother, Delia, weeping and asking why her son had thrown his life away. Each one was a carefully chosen dart aimed at their emotional vulnerabilities. With each illusion they faced and defeated, their bond grew stronger, more refined. They learned to rely on each other not just for physical support, but for mental and spiritual sanity. He provided the raw, defiant willpower, she provided the clear, harmonic perception that could distinguish truth from illusion. They were becoming a single, cohesive unit, their weaknesses covered by the other's strengths. They were getting closer. The trail of the tendril was clearer now, a dark smear against the chaotic backdrop, leading towards a specific point in the vast, empty sky. A floating, shattered island, bigger than the others, hovered in a sea of absolute nothingness. At its center was a structure that could only be described as a throne, carved from a single piece of black, light-absorbing crystal. And on that throne, waited the king of this broken realm. As they made the final, desperate leap from a drifting rock to the edge of the throne island, the psychological game stopped. The air grew still, the chaotic energy of the dimension seeming to hold its breath. Pikachu was there. He was trapped at the base of the throne, held in a cage made of solidified, writhing shadows. He was exhausted, terrified, but unharmed. He looked up and saw them, a desperate, hopeful Pika, escaping his lips. And then they saw Giratina. It was not the raging, mindless beast Ash had seen in stories. It was colossal, its serpentine body coiled around the back of the throne, its 6 powerful legs planted firmly on the crystalline ground. Its great, ghostly wings, ribbed with crimson spikes, were folded at its back. Its golden, slitted eyes were not filled with rage. They were filled with a cold, ancient, and terrifying intelligence. It was perfectly, unnervingly calm. It watched them approach, their ragged, desperate forms a stark contrast to its own absolute, majestic stillness. It had brought them here, to its seat of power, the very heart of its domain. The chase was over. The trial had begun. Ash and Melody walked forward, their steps sure, their hands clasped together. They stopped at the foot of the throne, looking up at the god who had torn their world apart. Giratina shifted its massive head, its golden eyes fixing on them. A voice echoed in their minds, not of sound, but of pure, telepathic intent. It was a voice that felt like grinding stone and cold starlight, a voice that had not spoken to lesser beings in millennia. The corruption has arrived, the voice stated, a simple, final judgment. Let the correction begin. Chapter 7, The Unmovable Object. The words of Giratina were not a threat, they were a pronouncement of cosmic law. Let the correction begin. The air in the distortion world, already thick with discord, grew heavy, oppressive, charged with the intent of a god in its own realm. The shattered throne island became the stage for a conflict that would ripple across the fabric of reality itself. Giratina did not roar. It did not charge. It simply acted. The crystalline ground beneath Ash and Melody's feet dissolved into a swirling vortex of their own memories. One moment, they were standing on the dark, glassy surface of the throne island, the next, they were in the middle of a sun-drenched field in Pallet Town. The sky was a perfect, nostalgic blue. A younger, happier Delia Ketchum was calling Ash's name for dinner. The smell of his mother's cooking was so real, so vivid, it was intoxicating. Ash? Melody asked, her voice tight with confusion as she looked around at the peaceful, idyllic scene. It's not real, Ash gritted out, the words a physical effort. He could feel the memories pull, a seductive whisper promising a return to a simpler, safer time. It's an illusion. A prison made of my own past. He could feel the subtle wrongness of it, the dissonant notes hiding beneath the perfect harmony of the memory. He's trying to separate us. The illusionary Delia walked towards him, her smile warm and loving. Come home, honey. You've been on the road for so long. It's time to rest. The emotional pull was immense. It was a siren's call to the part of him that was still just a boy from Pallet Town, a boy who was tired of fighting gods and armies. But the man he had become, the sovereign presence forged in crisis, refused to yield. You are not my mother, he said, his voice cold and hard. He focused on the bond, on the pure, true note of Melody's presence beside him. He poured his own willpower into that connection, a golden green aura flaring to life around him and Melody, pushing back against the false reality. And I am already home. The idyllic scene shattered like glass, the peaceful field dissolving back into the cold, dark throne island. Giratina's golden eyes narrowed slightly. The direct emotional assault had failed. It had underestimated the strength of their bond. A fascinating defiance, its voice echoed in their minds, laced with a cold, academic curiosity. Your harmony is resilient. But harmony is a fragile concept. It is defined by the discord that surrounds it. Allow me to provide a more robust counterpoint. The world twisted again. This time, it was not a pleasant memory. They were standing on the deck of the SS, the sky a churning, stormy gray. The ship was tilting violently, groaning under the assault of a titanic storm. It was the scene of one of Ash's earliest, most terrifying near-death experiences. But it was worse. The water was not just water, it was a churning sea of shadowy tendrils. And the figures of his friends, Brock and Misty, Jesse and James, even his own Pokemon, were pale, lifeless husks, their eyes empty, their bodies bearing the same soul-drained marks as the dead Aegis agent. This wasn't just an illusion. It was a nightmare given form, reality warped into a weapon of despair. This is what you bring, anomaly, Giratina's voice boomed, seeming to come from the storm itself. Ruin. Your very existence invites chaos. All those you bond with will eventually be consumed by the discord you create. He's wrong, Melody said, her voice a clear, defiant chime that cut through the roar of the phantom storm. She stood beside Ash, her hand in his, their shared aura a beacon in the manufactured darkness. We don't create discord. We create harmony where there was none. We are not a flaw. We are an answer. She closed her eyes and began to sing. It wasn't a song of power or creation. It was the simple, personal melody she had sung for him in the garden. A song of discovery, of feeling, of a shared life. It was a song that was purely, uniquely theirs. The melody did not shatter the nightmare, it transformed it. The stormy sea of shadows calmed. The pale, lifeless figures of Ash's friends faded like smoke. The violent tilt of the ship corrected itself. Her song, a testament to the truth of their bond, was a force that the lies of the distortion world could not withstand. The SS. And dissolved, leaving them once again before the silent, colossal form of Giratina. For the first time, a flicker of something other than calm appeared in Giratina's eyes. Frustration. Its attempts to break them psychologically, to turn their own minds against them, were failing. Their bond was not a simple fusion of power, it was a self-sustaining emotional and spiritual circuit. An attack on one was deflected by the other. Their harmony was a fortress. If you will not be unwritten, Giratina's voice was colder now, the academic curiosity replaced by a hard, sharp edge, then you will be erased. The time for games was over. Giratina moved, unfurling from its throne with a speed that defied its immense size. It was no longer attacking their minds, it was attacking their existence. It opened its great, draconic maw and unleashed a torrent of purple and black energy. A shadow force attack so powerful it tore a visible hole in the already fragile reality of the dimension. Move! Ash yelled. He and Melody dove in opposite directions. The beam of raw, anti-energy vaporized the spot where they had been standing, leaving behind a patch of absolute nothingness. Melody, find a weak point. Ash shouted, already on his feet. I'll draw its fire. He didn't have a plan. He just had instinct. He began to run, his movements now fluid and certain, even in this chaotic realm. He was a distraction, a target, a gnat buzzing around a titan. Giratina turned its massive head, its gaze locking onto Ash. It unleashed another shadow force, and then another, each blast powerful enough to annihilate a mountain. Ash weaved and dodged, a blur of motion against the dark backdrop. He was relying on the preternatural battlefield awareness his bond with Melody gave him, anticipating the attacks a microsecond before they were launched. It was a desperate, impossible dance on the edge of oblivion. Meanwhile, Melody was not watching Ash. Her eyes were closed, her senses extended. She was not looking at Giratina's physical form, she was listening to its energy, to the song of its being. It was a song of ancient, rigid order, of immense power, of profound loneliness. And like any song, it had a structure. A rhythm. And a flaw. Ash, her voice was a clear thought in his mind, cutting through the chaos of the battle. The wings. They are not fully part of this dimension. They are his anchor, the point through which he channels the power of this world. They are ethereal. An attack might pass through them, but a being, a living being, might be able to disrupt the flow. It was an insane idea. To attack a god's power at its very source. Ash sidestepped another blast that left a smoking crater in the crystalline ground. He looked at Giratina's great, ghostly wings. They shimmered, phasing in and out of tangibility. Melody was right. They weren't entirely physical. Pikachu. Ash yelled towards the cage of shadows. I need a launch. Use Volt Tackle, aim for the ground right in front of me. Now. Trapped and terrified, Pikachu still heard the unwavering command in his partner's voice. He trusted it. He trusted him. He mustered all his remaining strength, his body crackling to life. He couldn't break the cage, but he could still unleash his power. He slammed his body against the shadowy floor, and a focused, contained burst of volt-tackle energy erupted from the cage, striking the ground at Ash's feet. The impact, combined with the unstable nature of the island, created a ramp of shattered crystal. Ash was already running. He hit the ramp and launched himself into the air, a human missile aimed directly at the colossal, shifting form of Giratina. Giratina, its attention focused on obliterating the ground where Ash had been, was caught by surprise. It turned its massive head just as Ash soared towards its back, aiming for the point where the ghostly wings met its armored hide. Ash passed through the ethereal wing. The sensation was indescribable. It was like diving into a river of cold static and pure law. He felt the raw, untamed power of the distortion world flowing through him, a force that should have torn his mortal body to shreds. But his own aura, the golden-green light of his bond, flared protectively, insulating him. He was a foreign object in the circuit, a disruption in the flow. Giratina let out a sound for the first time, a deafening, screeching roar of pure, unadulterated pain. Not physical pain, but the pain of its very essence being violated, its connection to its realm being short-circuited. The god convulsed, its massive body thrashing. Its control over the dimension wavered. The cage of shadows holding Pikachu flickered and dissolved. Pikachu, freed, shook his head and immediately scrambled towards Melody. Ash landed hard on the other side of Giratina, rolling to absorb the impact. The backlash from passing through the wing had left him drained, his body screaming in protest. But he had done it. He had wounded the unmovable object. Giratina's rage was now absolute. Its cold, analytical mind was gone, replaced by a primal, divine fury. The entire distortion world seemed to groan in sympathy with its master's anger. The sky churned, the floating islands shaking violently. "You will be undone," it roared, its voice no longer a telepathic whisper but a dimension-shattering bellow. It lunged, its physical form now its primary weapon. This was no longer a correction. It was an execution. But as it lunged, a new sound cut through the chaos. A sound that did not belong in this realm of discord. It was the sharp, angry hiss of a dimensional rift being torn open. A vortex of gray and black, starkly different from Giratina's portals, ripped open in the air above the throne island. From it, a single figure dropped, landing in a crouch between the enraged Giratina and the exhausted Ash. The figure stood up. He wore the familiar black tactical gear of an Aegis agent, but his helmet was gone, revealing a shock of purple hair and a face set in a grim, determined scowl. In his hand, he held a device that pulsed with a dangerous, unstable energy. At his side, materialized from a pokeball, was his electivire, crackling with power and ready for a fight. It was Paul. "Ash," Paul grunted, not looking at him. His eyes were fixed on the terrifying, enraged form of Giratina. "You are still a chaotic, sentimental fool." "Paul." Ash stammered, his mind struggling to comprehend this impossible arrival. "What are you doing here?" "My job," Paul said, his voice flat. He held up the device in his hand. It was a prototype dimensional anchor, a last-ditch piece of tech from the Aegis R&D labs. I reported that AET Prime and AET Meloetta had been neutralized by an unknown energy source. My superiors were satisfied. They closed the file. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "They are idiots. They saw a problem disappear and called it a victory. I saw a rival variable eliminated by an apex predator. And I decided that an unbalanced god is a greater threat to the order of the world than a boy with a divine girlfriend." His logic was cold, ruthless, and, in this insane context, perfectly sensible. He had made a tactical choice. He had chosen the devil he knew over the one he didn't. "This entity," Paul continued, gesturing to Giratina, "is a threat to all existence. You are merely a threat to the status quo. The tactical priority is clear." He spared a glance at Ash, and for the first time, Ash saw something in his rival's eyes beyond contempt. It was a sliver of grudging, almost imperceptible respect. Now, are you going to lie there feeling sorry for yourself, or are you going to help me put this thing back in its box? A grin, tired but genuine, spread across Ash's face. He pushed himself to his feet, Melody and Pikachu rushing to his side. The unlikeliest of alliances had just been forged in the heart of a broken dimension. Electivire, Thunder Punch. Aim for its head. Draw its attention. Paul commanded, a field general taking charge. Electivire roared and charged, its fists crackling with immense power. Pikachu, you too. Use Volt Tackle. Ash yelled, his old fire reignited. Melody, find us a rhythm. We need to sync up. The battle that followed was staggering. It was a clash of three completely different philosophies of power. Ash and Melody's fluid, harmonic style, their attacks weaving together in a beautiful, deadly dance. Paul's rigid, tactical brutality, his commands precise, his Electivire a battering ram of raw strength. And the Aegis's advanced technology, as Paul deployed energy shields and disruptive sonic pulses from his gauntlet. It was a chaotic, desperate, but surprisingly effective combination. Ash's intuitive, creative strategies blended with Paul's cold, analytical tactics. They were two sides of the same coin, and for the first time, they were facing the same direction. They fought with a desperate synergy, pushing the enraged Giratina back. Ash and Pikachu's speed, Paul and Electivire's power, and Melody's harmonic support that seemed to subtly amplify their strengths and predict the Titan's movements. They managed to drive it back towards its throne, a barrage of coordinated thunderbolts and thunder punches striking its armored hide. They were actually doing it. They were winning. Wounded, enraged, and cornered, Giratina did something none of them could have predicted. It stopped fighting. It reared back, its golden eyes burning with a new, terrifying light. It was no longer focused on them. It was focused on the world around them. Its own world. If my realm is to be tainted by such chaos, its voice thundered, shaking the very foundations of the dimension, then it will be unmade. And your world will be unmade with it. The throne island began to crumble. The floating crystals and rock formations started to vibrate, then shatter. The bruised purple sky began to crack, showing not the real world, but a terrifying, absolute white void. The distortion world, the balancing force between dimensions, was beginning to collapse in on itself. Giratina, in its divine rage, had made a final, terrible choice. If it couldn't correct the flaw in creation, it would simply delete the entire equation. Chapter 8, the first note of a new age. The end of a dimension sounds like silence. Not a peaceful quiet, but a profound, terrifying absence of everything. The grinding of the crystalline islands, the upward rush of the reverse waterfalls, the low hum of dimensional static, it all ceased. The world held its breath, poised on the brink of its own annihilation. Giratina's rage had become a sublime, suicidal stillness. It was going to pull the pin on reality itself. Cracks of pure, white void spread across the bruised purple sky like lightning in reverse. The throne island crumbled at the edges, chunks of it falling not down, but away, dissolving into the encroaching nothingness. What is it doing? Paul yelled, his tactical mind struggling to process an enemy whose final move was self-destruction. The dimensional anchor on his wrist was screaming a high-pitched alarm, its readings going off the charts. It's destabilizing the entire dimension. This place acts as a buffer between our world and everything else. If it collapses, the resulting paradox will create a chain reaction. It won't just destroy Sinnoh, it will erase our entire reality from the timeline. His words hung in the silent, crumbling air, a death sentence for 1 trillion souls. Ash looked at the enraged, resolute face of Giratina. It was a guardian, a cosmic janitor, and it had decided the only way to clean up the mess was to burn the whole house down. He looked at Paul, his rival, who had crossed dimensions to fight a common enemy. He looked at Pikachu, who stood ready to fight to the very end. And he looked at Melody. In that moment of absolute crisis, Ash felt a strange, profound calm settle over him. He finally understood. They couldn't win this fight. Not with force. Giratina wasn't a villain to be defeated, it was a fundamental part of the universe that had become imbalanced. You don't kill gravity, you learn how to fly. You don't defeat order, you restore its harmony. We can't beat it, Ash said, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the rising panic. We have to heal it. Paul stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Heal it? It's a god throwing a tantrum, and it's about to take the whole universe with it. The only way to heal it is with a giga impact to the face. No, Melody said, her voice gaining a strength that silenced them both. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the broken, angry deity. Ash is right. It is a song that has lost its key. It is screaming in pain. You cannot silence a scream by shouting over it. You must give it a new melody to follow. She looked at Ash, her musical note eyes filled with a terrifying, beautiful certainty. He knew what she was going to say before she said it. He felt her intent through their bond, a resolve as solid and as absolute as the earth. I have to sing, she said. The relic song. Not the song of binding that saved you. The true song. The song of creation and harmony. It is the oldest melody. The one that first soothed the chaos from which all things were born. It is the only thing that can quell a god's rage and mend a broken dimension. Ash's heart clenched. He remembered the last time she had sung a song of such power. It had nearly cost her everything. It had unmade her. Melody, no. It will destroy you. You're not Meloetta anymore. You don't have that kind of power. I don't, she agreed, her hand finding his, her touch both a comfort and a farewell. But we do. She looked from him to their clasped hands, where the faint, golden-green aura of their bond still pulsed. Our life force. Our harmony. It is a new kind of power, one this universe has never seen. It will be the instrument. I am the musician. The relic song will be our voice. The cost was unspoken but absolute. To perform a song of that magnitude, she would have to channel every ounce of their shared life force. It would leave her, and by extension, him, utterly, completely, terrifyingly vulnerable. While I sing, she said, her gaze turning to Paul, her voice taking on a queen's command, I will be defenseless. The song requires my entire being. Giratina will sense the harmony I am creating. It will see it as the ultimate threat to its discord. It will throw everything it has left at me to stop the first note from being sung. The mission crystallized in Ash's mind, stark and simple. The final battle would not be an attack. It would be a defense. A heroic, desperate, last stand. Paul, Ash said, turning to his rival. There was no plea in his voice. It was a statement between equals. I need you to bide her time. Paul looked from Melody's resolute face to Ash's unyielding eyes. He looked at the cracks of non-existence eating away at the world. His entire life had been a pursuit of order and strength. And in this moment, the only logical path to preserving any order at all was to trust the very anomaly he had been sent to destroy. He gave a sharp, definitive nod. Tell me what you need. The plan was made in seconds, a flurry of commands and shared intent. There was no time for more. Melody walked to the center of the crumbling island, a lone, fragile figure against the backdrop of cosmic annihilation. She sat, crossing her legs, her posture serene, a beacon of calm in the storm. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Now, she whispered, the word a soft breeze that was felt by Ash across their bond. The moment she did, Giratina sensed it. It felt the nascent harmony, the first few notes of the creation song gathering in her soul. It was an intolerable purity in its world of rage. It let out a dimension-shattering roar and charged, its full, unrestrained fury now focused on that single, seated girl. It's now or never. Paul bellowed. Electivire, Giga Impact. Intercept. Pikachu, Volt Tackle. Go. Ash screamed. What followed was the most desperate fight of their lives. It was no longer about winning. It was about surviving, second by second. Paul and Ash became a living wall, a shield of flesh and electricity thrown in front of Melody. Electivire, a titan of raw power, slammed into Giratina's side, the Giga Impact cracking its armored hide but barely slowing its charge. Pikachu, a golden meteor, struck its leg, a brilliant flash of light that made the god stumble. They were gnats fighting a dragon. Giratina swatted Electivire aside with a sweep of its massive tail, sending the electric behemoth crashing into a crumbling crystal formation. It snapped at Pikachu, who dodged by a hair's breadth, the wind from the god's teeth buffeting him. Keep it off her. Ash yelled, his mind a whirlwind of tactical desperation. He was no longer a general, he was a berserker, his only thought to protect the precious, fragile point behind him. He saw Giratina rear up, preparing to unleash another shadow force, aimed directly at Melody. There was no time for Pikachu or Electivire to intercept. Without thinking, Ash ran forward, grabbing a jagged shard of the crystalline ground, the only weapon he had. "Hui!" he screamed, hurling the shard at Giratina's face. It bounced harmlessly off its armored head, a pebble against a mountain. But it did the one thing he needed it to do. It got the god's attention. Giratina's burning golden eyes left Melody and locked onto him. It forgot the singer. It saw only the pest, the defiant mortal who dared to challenge it. It lowered its head, its maw opening to erase him. "Paul!" Ash screamed, not in fear, but as a command. Paul, recovering from the blow, saw the opening Ash had created. Electivire. Its head is down. Thunder. Electivire, bruised but not broken, roared and unleashed a colossal pillar of lightning that struck Giratina point-blank on the top of its head. The god reeled back, stunned, its shadow force attack dissipating. Behind them, Melody began to sing. The first note was not a sound. It was a wave of pure, golden light that pulsed outwards from her, washing over the throne island. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated harmony. The crumbling of the island slowed. The encroaching whiteness of the void seemed to hesitate. The song grew. Her voice, amplified by the full, resonant power of their shared life force, filled the broken dimension. It was a song of beginnings, of order born from chaos, of light banishing darkness. It was a lullaby for a broken universe. The wave of harmony washed over Giratina. The rage in its eyes faltered, replaced by a deep, ancient confusion. The song was familiar, a memory from the dawn of time, from before it was a guardian, before it was a renegade. It was the song that had sung it into existence. It let out a low, mournful cry, a sound not of anger, but of a deep, primal pain finally being soothed. The song reached its crescendo. Melody's voice soared, and the golden light exploded outwards, a supernova of creation. It flooded every corner of the distortion world. The cracked sky healed, the bruised purple returning, soft and whole. The shattered islands ceased their trembling, their sharp, broken edges smoothing over. The reverse waterfalls began to flow with clean, clear water. The discord was gone. The dimension was not just saved, it was renewed. Healed. The harmony washed over Giratina one last time. The red spikes on its wings faded to a soft gray. The furious light in its golden eyes softened, becoming calm, watchful, and grateful. It was no longer an enraged beast. It was a guardian, its balance restored, its purpose reaffirmed. It gave Ash, Paul, and Melody one long, final look, a look of profound, cosmic understanding, before it turned and faded into the shadows of its newly healed realm, its duty resumed. As the last note of the song faded, the golden light receded. Melody collapsed, her body slumping forward. The dimensional anchor on Paul's wrist gave a final, triumphant chirp before a stable, shimmering rift back to their own world tore open behind them. Ash was at Melody's side in an instant. He gathered her into his arms, his heart pounding with terror. She was terrifyingly light, her body cold. Their bond, their shared life force, was a faint, flickering ember, almost extinguished. "Melody," he whispered, his voice breaking. Her eyes fluttered open. The musical notes within them were dim, but they were there. A weak, tired smile touched her lips. "We did it, Ash," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears streamed down Ash's face, tears of relief, of fear, of a love so profound it ached. "You did it, Melody. You saved everything. Come on," Paul's voice, rough with emotion, cut through the moment. "Let's get out of this hellhole before it changes its mind." Ash carefully lifted Melody into his arms. With Pikachu on his shoulder and a silent, grim-faced Paul at his side, he stepped through the portal. They emerged back in the whispering garden of Gracidia. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden glow over a valley that was scarred but not broken. The Aegis golems were deactivated, their soldiers rounded up by Kale and the gardeners, who now stared in stunned silence at the figures emerging from the shimmering rift. The Aegis division, its leadership disgraced by the unsanctioned cleanse operation and the subsequent cover-up attempt by the regional commander, was in disarray. The official report, filed by an anonymous source with an unimpeachable level of technical detail, would speak of a catastrophic equipment malfunction and a localized dimensional collapse, with Paul's rogue unit being credited with containing the disaster and saving the garden. The truth of Ash, Melody, and Giratina would be buried, a secret known only to the few who had witnessed it. Paul stood for a moment, looking at the peaceful valley. He looked at Ash, cradling Melody protectively. The world he had fought to protect, a world of black and white rules and rigid order, seemed impossibly naive now. "Ketchum," he said, the name no longer an insult. He held out his hand. "The world's better off with a little chaos in it, I guess." Ash, shifting Melody slightly, took his hand and shook it. It was a firm, solid grip. An alliance forged in hell, ending in a quiet dawn. No grand speeches were needed. The understanding was absolute. Without another word, Paul turned and walked away, his electivire at his side. He didn't look back. He had his own reports to file, his own future to navigate in an organization he no longer fully believed in. Ash carried Melody to the edge of the lake, the same spot where she had first taught him about their bond. He sat with her in his arms as the sun climbed higher, pouring its warmth into them. He focused on their bond, on the tiny, flickering ember of their life force, and he poured all of his own will, his own love, his own stubborn refusal to give up, into it. Slowly, painstakingly, the ember began to glow a little brighter. The cold in her skin began to recede. Hours later, she stirred, her head nuzzling against his chest. "Ash? I'm here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm right here." She looked up at him, and he saw that the deep, oceanic weariness that had haunted her eyes since her transformation was finally gone. In its place was a quiet, profound peace. He was no longer Ash Ketchum, Pokemon trainer, chasing a distant dream of being the best. That boy had been erased at the spear pillar. He was Ash Ketchum, a sovereign, a protector, a partner. She was no longer Meloetta, the mythical Pokemon, a being of song and sacrifice. She was Melody, a woman who had faced down gods and tasted the simple joy of being human. They were something new. Forged in the fires of cosmic crisis, tempered by the desperate battles for survival, and bound by a love that had literally remade the world. Their great, terrifying, dimension-hopping adventure was over. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss not of tentative discovery, but of deep, abiding certainty. A promise of 1,000 sunrises to come. Their life together had just begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.